Okay, friends, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Jason, it has been way too long.
Couple years.
Welcome to Los Angeles.
Yeah. No, it's nice being here. I like I said, my girlfriend lives here, and it's been the weather's much more pleasant than in Virginia right now. So it's a happy medium that we're spending here.
Absolutely. Virginia is cold. Yeah, I have some friends in DC right now that I'm in touch with, and they just say like it's trying to snow, but it's just rain and slush and misery.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You're doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's been an awesome time. Since we last talked, got a lot accomplished, got a lot done, and so there's some more in the future. So looking forward to the conversation with you.
Amazing. So obviously, for those people who don't know, you and I did a COVID call together in like April or May 2020 during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's been a real goal of mine now that I'm back in the US to like reconnect with everyone that I did a COVID call with.
Oh, yeah.
Just to like, rehash the good conversation, and then also just figure out how you've been in the last 4 years. It's almost been 4 years. We're like a month and a half away from a 4-year anniversary of misery.
Yeah. Oh man, it's crazy to think about it. It's just a flash in time. I feel like now where there's time missing. It feels like from that time to now.
It's strange. Like I know a lot of people who were traveling a lot for work.
Mm-hmm.
They got kind of caught up in COVID, and then they were like, oh, it was so nice to like take a break and like actually relax. But for me, it was the total opposite. Like I was always ready to keep going. I was ready to keep moving, and it was just like an unwelcomed 4-year break.
Yeah, I was working from an office and doing all that fun stuff, and then when it happened, we started working from home, and I've worked from home ever since. So it's freed me up to do a lot of different things that I've wanted to do outside the office as well. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise for some people, I think. But then definitely the social aspect and getting out and talking to people and being active out there, that put a damper on a lot of that stuff. So,
well, no one wants to meet face to face anymore. And that's why I insist. Like, if someone wants to come and chat with me, they have to come here. Like, I'm not going to do a Zoom. Like, I want to meet people. I want to like shake hands again. Like, really have a good connection with someone. And to do that, you have to be face to face.
Yeah, exactly. The conversations flow better. I think just everything's better than doing it over Zoom or one or the other.
And you want to be able to get a read on someone. Like you want to know if like person you're hanging out with is cool, or like they're a good dude, right? And it's just like or a woman, and you can't do it remotely.
No. I mean, they're in their pajamas in the living room somewhere doing the podcast, and you don't understand. You don't get a real feel for them and who they are.
The best part about this is we both have pants on.
Yes,
and everyone can know that, right? We're not just sitting around at home on Zooms all day. We actually had to go out in public to get here.
Exactly.
So, I mean, for the people who didn't listen to our COVID call way back in the day, let's kind of rehash it, because I'm super fascinated by you and your life and what you've built, on your endurance training, and, you're just fit beyond all recognition, but also too, your combat history, all of this kind of sums up a little bit about who you are. I'd just love to get into it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to get you kicked started. Yeah, you brought up the combat history. That's kind of the genesis of it all. Back, 1999, 2000 time frame, I signed an ROTC scholarship, not knowing that 9/11 was going to happen at the time. And my guidance counselor from high school was like, "Yeah, this is a great way to get into college and not have to pay and all that fun stuff." And 9/11 happened my sophomore year of college, and the world kind of changed for me from that point forward.
That's the understatement of the century.
Yeah.
But let's go back a little further. So where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from the Virginia Beach, Williamsburg area out in Virginia. So it's on the East Coast, for the furthest you can get away from here, in the continental United States.
Did your parents do that on purpose? They just wanted to raise you as far away from La La Land as possible.
No, they actually grew up there themselves. I went to the same middle school and high school as my parents. It was just kind of that small town type living in a lot of ways, and so I had some of the same coaches and high school teachers and things like that my parents did. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's like super local.
Yeah, it's super local. Yeah.
That's cool.
So that was an interesting growing up in that way. My parents had me as teenagers. My dad was 19, my mom was 17. So did whatever they could to put the food on the table. And I learned a lot about hard work and commitment and those kind of things. The values system that I kind of live with today started there with my parents and the way they raised me as teenagers, and the family helping.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, I mean, you're one. So just randomly, like you're one of the only people I think I know who have been born to teenage parents. Like, was it better having younger parents? That like, were they more open to doing stuff, whereas maybe older parents are kind of more set in their ways? Like my parents were in their 30s, I guess.
Yeah.
My dad was in his 30s. My mom was like late 20s when I was born.
Yeah.
And I you know, by the time I was like conscious, they were almost 40, right? And they were kind of already set in their ways and the ways that they did things. But what was it being like a conscious child with parents in their 20s? That must have been cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, for the most part, you know, during that time frame, you're talking about the 80s and early 90s growing up.
Let's not age ourselves today. Let's not age ourselves today.
Yeah, I know. But, so, I mean, I was a latchkey kid. I walked to school and all that kind of stuff because my dad was out working 2 jobs. My mom was working. So, you know, they were out doing whatever they could to put a roof over our head and food on the table. And so, for a lot of, in a lot of ways, I ended up raising myself in some ways. And then with my parents specifically, I think they did a lot of growing up with me. So
that's interesting. Yeah, that's
going
solid. Yeah,
figured out who they were as people through their 20s and everything else. So I was very fortunate to have grandparents that, you know, had already had a set foundation, that were very set in their ways, that taught me a lot of things that maybe my parents couldn't have taught me as they kind of grew through their adulthood as well.
Well, I remember myself in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I was a fucking mess. Like I couldn't have raised a kid.
Well, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I'm a girl dad. And so I had her, she was 33 when I was 33 when we had her. And I remember her, when she was born and going through those first couple of months of just being a dad, I was trying to think back and how the hell did my dad and my mom do this?
Yeah. It gives you a newfound respect.
Exactly. I had to call them a couple times and be like, hey, thank you for all the things I put you through.
Yeah. You see it full circle once I guess you become a father on your own.
Yeah. Definitely. 100%.
Amazing. So what was it like growing up so close to Washington, D.C.? Like you're just a stone's throw from the capital.
Yeah. To be honest, we didn't get up there too often. I mean, the one trip I remember specifically was our big field trip that we had in middle school out there to D.C. But the next time that I really experienced DC wasn't until I was an adult and in the military and doing trips out to the Pentagon and things like that, and being in that world. And then even more so once I got out of the military and became a military defense contractor, and a lot of the contracting offices and everything is there in the DC area. So I didn't really get a whole full DC experience till I was already in my mid to late 20s, early 30s.
The only reason I was asking is because I was having a coffee before you came over, and I was just sitting at my table there, and I was just surfing through on my phone, and I saw this picture of Pablo Escobar and his son in front of the White House, when he was officially the world's most wanted man.
Yeah.
And I just thought of like maybe you and your dad, like him holding your hand in the late 80s, taking you to the White House for the first time or something, or a school trip, and then you just happen to like bump shoulders with Pablo Escobar.
Yeah, that would have been amazing. But no, it's interesting you bring up like my parents and then my raising and childhood, and then where I'm at today as an adult. We didn't travel like at all when I was growing up. Like family vacations and leaving the state and leaving the city, leaving within a 20-mile radius of where you lived was just not really the thing. And it wasn't until I decided to go to college, and then I went to college in Kentucky, and was, an 8-hour drive away, was when I finally got away from home for the first time really, and started being like, hey, this exploring and getting out things kind of neat. And then the military obviously expanded upon that. And then as I've gone through adulthood, it's kind of grown. But people all the time think, with the life I live and the traveling I like to do, that my parents, and that's kind of how I was raised, and it wasn't that at all. We didn't, I don't remember leaving with anywhere outside of a 20-mile radius from the house.
It's amazing how like surprisingly regional the United States is, and obviously the United States is famous for having only like 20 or 30% of its citizens owning passports, right? Who have actually traveled internationally. But even more than that, it's like some people just don't leave their state, or if they do, they drive, and they only go as far as they can drive in a day or two, and that's their like whole ecosystem, and they don't want to see anything else, and they're just happy. It's they're happy-go-lucky to be where they are, doing what they're doing, same friends, same family, same routine, but the whole idea of like trying to go to the other side of the world makes no sense to them. I love that. I love that about this, about the United States, because, obviously the United States projects its power in many ways across the world, but it has such a happy regional kind of population. It's a total disconnect, I feel.
100%. Yeah. I definitely have felt that. And like growing up and then through adult life and talking to people and connecting with people, it's a lot of people I've spoken with that haven't left their hometown or haven't left their state. And then they're fed their information about other places through the media or through what they see on social media and things like that. And then when I come back from an area like the Amazon jungle, and people have this image in their head what it's like and what the people are like, and then you have to explain them as completely kind of different but it's it's very different, but it's very much the same. Every community you go to and every tribe you spend time with, everybody kind of wants the same things. They have the same values, and they're looking to grow and do the same things you are. It's just a different way of living.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, you and I both grew up without the internet, so I hate to age us both.
We're really aging
we really did, yeah. But like what kind of gave you a curiosity about what was out there? Because obviously, as we'll get into your career a little later, I'm just curious if there were any influences as a child. Like I knew when I grew up, I didn't really rely too much on like television.
Mm-hmm.
I was more interested in like reading and pictures.
Yeah.
And so my mom had like National Geographic books everywhere. Mm-hmm. So like we had those yellow framed National Geographics all over the place, and it got me so interested in the rest of the world because TV at that time hadn't caught up to where, print was, for example.
Exactly.
And now, of course, print is totally dead and TV's on steroids and social media is killing our brains entirely.
Yeah.
But 30 years ago, or 35 years, 40 years ago. Yeah. All we had was what was our publication that kind of set you alight?
It was actually you mentioned it, National Geographic. I think I remember being in elementary school and specifically in the 7th to 8th grade time period where you start learning about world history and you start getting the idea that the world's a little bit bigger than what's just in your own backyard. And that's when that's when the intrigue started for me, is what else is out there. And I definitely, it was National Geographic, and then like you said, books, being able to read. I read a lot of, I love biographies, documentary style movies, things like that. But it was reading the biographies of people that had gone places and adventured, and reading kind of their journals and reading those kind of things definitely set off the want and desire to go out and see for myself.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I know as you get a little older too, for me at least, like Ernest Hemingway became a huge influence. Like once you kind of understood what drinking was and having lovers all around the world or something like that, like very Hemingway, like, always chasing a woman with a whiskey in hand. But his books became such a big influence on me kind of in late high school and university when like, this romanticized version of, being in Cuba and fishing, deep sea fishing and all this kind of stuff, or being in the plains of Africa. Yeah. And, or in the Spanish Civil War, right? For whom the bell tolls. So it's like this idea of like him kind of using his travels and his experience to write fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You nailed it.
Yeah. No, it's wild. So, you're like a strong guy. Like, did you play any sports when you were a kid? Like, what did your parents get you into anything other than soccer? Because every kid plays soccer.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I didn't play soccer. So, the only one? Yeah, I'm the only one. No, I grew up. One of my first sports I ended up playing was baseball, and played baseball for a little bit. Did t-ball, kind of coach pitch type stuff, and then. Speaking about publications that kind of formed me, Sports Illustrated was really popular at the time, obviously.
Did you hear they just hired everyone at Sports Illustrated?
I saw.
How important was Sports Illustrated to you when you were a kid? It was huge for me.
Yeah, it was same. And so,
and the swimsuit issue.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
I was actually talking to my girlfriend about that because she's been applying to go be part of the swimsuit edition and the swimsuit stuff. So we were just talking about the Sports Illustrated thing. But yeah, I remember I picked up a Sports Illustrated one time, and it was a football player. It was Bruce Smith, and who was from Virginia Beach, my kind of hometown. He was playing for the Buffalo Bills at the time, and he was just wearing his uniform. He had like bloody pants on and stuff. And
he was like a huge tight end. I remember Bruce.
Yeah, he was a big defensive end.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting there looking at that, and my dad had played football. My grandfather, football was a big part of our family, but they never really pushed sports on us. It was, if you're going to do it, it's going to be your decision. But when you do decide to do this, understand that you're making a commitment and you're going to hold to your commitments and things like that. So I remember looking at it and was like, I want to do this. Like, this looks bad.
He was a fucking gladiator. I remember that guy. He was a beast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I remember being like, I want to do that. So ended up getting into like football as well. And so the spring and most of the summer playing baseball, all-star baseball, things like that. And then the fall time would roll around and play football. And did that all the way through high school. And then right around my sophomore, junior year of high school, I kind of knew football was going to be it for me if I was going to go to the next level and play for college. And so kind of gave baseball up and played football. Ended up getting a scholarship to a small school out in Kentucky, and ended up doing that football scholarship along with the ROTC scholarship for the military. Ended up paying off my whole college. So my teenage parents didn't have to worry about that. So and so played football 4 years of college, and then when I left out of college, joined the military. And obviously, a lot of us know that it served in the military. Fitness is a central part to your service. So
it should be.
It should be. Yeah, exactly. So it just kind of continued all the way up to the point I got out of the military.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back it up a bit. What position did you play in your football days?
So high school I played quarterback, and
naturally. Come on, that's where you get the women.
Yeah, exactly. I was I joke around with my girlfriend all the time about this. I was that guy. I was most athletic in high school. I was the quarterback of the football team. I was up for prom king and all that fun stuff. So I was that guy in high school. But
it's a good guy to be.
It's a good guy to be. Yeah. The fun thing was the talent in that area for a lot of people that are familiar with sports and football and basketball and stuff. I went to the same high school as Allen Iverson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Amazing. I love Iverson.
Same high school.
Yeah.
So saw him driving around in his Bentley sometimes in the neighborhood, and then played against Michael Vick and some of these guys in football that were, grew up in the same community that I did. So, a lot of those guys, we go back to my parents and raising me. A lot of those guys grew up in the same Section 8 housing, that, low income housing that I did when I was, very young.
Sure.
So it was wild seeing them grow and end up playing professional sports and all those kind of different things. So yeah, it was a fun time growing up.
I feel like for the people who are kind of with us internationally today, like want to understand how much of a hotbed Virginia is for sports.
Yeah.
Like it really is. Like I don't want to sound like a dick in Virginia, but there's not much to do in Virginia. Like people take their sports seriously.
I put it on the same level as, playing football in Texas and Florida and some of those hotbeds as well. It's a way out, to be honest. It was a way out for me. If I hadn't played football and had, the resources that were provided to me because I played sports and could throw a football around and play with a ball, I don't know what would have happened after high school. So it was an opportunity, and I took that opportunity. My brother took the same opportunity, and so we've kind of grew through that and got out of Virginia and got out of potentially bad situations. A lot of guys that I play football with and sports with are still dealing drugs on the corner of some of the bad roads that we have down there, and they didn't get out. So. Yeah, it's a hotbed for specific reasons. I think it's just for a lot of kids, that's the only way they can get out.
That's an interesting kind of way of describing it. Like, I don't think I've met too many people who, used sports as a way to get out of their childhood or get out of a bad neighborhood that they were born into. I mean, would you ever have thought of staying in Virginia? Like, did you apply to some universities in Virginia, or did you definitely want to get out? Like, did you want to break? Did you have a sense of needing to break free of that experience and really go somewhere? Because I had a similar feeling, but later, and we can get into that. But I went to China. I really got the fuck out. Yeah. But I'm just curious, you at 18 years old.
Yeah. I think it was a desperate need to break free. A lot of the recruiting trips and things I went on a few Virginia recruiting trips, but a lot of the places I went to were outside of the state. They were in Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, Kentucky, those kind of places. It was
still regional though.
Still regional. At that point, I think, if I go into the USC, for instance, out here in California and LA, that was too big for me, I think, at that point. But I knew I wanted to get out and see, some more of the world, but still have that comfort of being able to reach back and touch home within 8 hours or however long it was going to take me.
Sure.
Yeah.
And going from, the prom king and the captain of the football team and the quarterback and all those great high school adventures that you're on, what was it like then transitioning into university? Like, where were you in Kentucky?
So I was in Eastern Kentucky, and it was a small school. So we weren't playing big time. A lot of we weren't playing USC and UCLA and all these big.
Well, that's why you can still walk.
Yeah.
So exactly. let's be happy that you walked into the house today. Yeah, without broken.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a lot of my stuff comes from the military, to be honest. But it level sets you in a lot of ways, and I think it does that to a lot of people. When even if they don't go to college, adulthood will kind of chop you to your knees and say, "Hey, look, you're on, whatever you did in high school is great, but now welcome to this level playing field where if you're competing at a high level, everybody that's around you has competed at the same high level. Everybody else that's on this football team was also all district, all conference, all that stuff in their separate states and in their little areas. So you go from being the badass in high school and the number one guy to now you're just another person, and now you're having to work your way back up through that.
Well, it's such a strange thing. Like most people who don't play sports just don't get it.
Yeah.
Like you go from being, high school senior, prom king, quarterback, team captain, and then the next year, and this is like, most people don't become the team captain in their freshman year.
Yeah.
Most people aren't an all-star in their freshman year.
Yeah.
And to kind of hit that bump in year one and then kind of recover and then build back your career from scratch almost is really difficult. Like I had it in my, I played basketball, right? So, high school, I was top dog. And then when I got to university, I didn't get crushed my first year, but I just remember the gap between what I was playing and what I was now expected to be able to, the level I was expected to perform at was a huge gap.
Yeah.
And it was intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely, that's the same thing I experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then once I left out of college, you build your way up through college, you graduate college. And
what'd you study in college?
Political science and history.
Did political science too.
Yeah.
Totally useless.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But at that point, through the college years, I think what really kind of like, I guess, set my way with what I was going to do after the military was when 9/11 happened my sophomore year. At first, it seemed like it could have just been another desert storm. We're going to be in and out in, a month or 2 months or whatever it was going to be. And then as the conflict continued to go with Afghanistan and Iraq, you kind of understood my senior year, especially when I graduate, I don't have to go find a job. I don't have to go, do what my other classmates were doing. I knew graduation day, I got my commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. The very next week, I was at my first duty station going through my officer basic course, basically teaching you leadership skills and all the basic things you need to understand before you get to your first unit. And then 6 months later, I graduated that. Within 30 days after that, I was on a plane to Iraq. So, yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I might ask some questions that are based on ignorance, not disrespect.
No,
okay. Because I've never been in the military and I never felt an urge to serve coming from Canada, but I know it's a huge deal here in the United States. So, did your family have any background in the military at all?
Not really. I mean, my grandfather had served in the Air National Guard in Virginia. I had a great uncle. My grandmother's uncle had served in World War II as a bomber engineer. Did the Burma to China hump. Flew that in World War II.
Oh, I've been trekking and climbing in that area along the border with Myanmar and China. And there's still wreckages of planes in those mountains in really remote places. I never found one myself, but I did go looking for one. And that was a famous route and it's one of the most amazing parts of the world.
Yeah, he died just recently at the age of 97. And I got a chance to have a few conversations with him about it and what had happened. And he would tell a story about how the guys on the ground before you flew would ask for your watches and, basically ask to take your, what's in your footlocker, basically knowing that you might not come back.
That's terrifying, like taking off your watch before you fly, knowing that you don't want the enemy to take it if you get shot down or something like that.
Exactly, and you're giving it to a buddy who can take it for them. So he was telling stories like that, which were kind of amazing because that generation is just completely different than I feel like the generation we're living in today with service and just, how we live in general. So listening to that greatest generation from the World War II era and just getting his stories live from him was just amazing.
It's great that you were able to reference that time because, like you said, the greatest generation. I mean, I look at people that were born back then and the way they talk about things like respect, things like service, things that people, take for granted now today. Like they wore it on their chest, like they wore it on their sleeves. And I just feel like today we're not even like the same species of the people that existed like in between the two world wars. Like I just feel like we're so far gone in the way we treat other people and what we do and how we behave. It's just like it's not even the same species. Like I just feel like we're totally lost.
Yeah, and a lot of that. And there's a study done. Sebastian Junger, who's written a couple of different books, and he wrote Tribe, and he's also done some documentaries on Netflix and everything.
Well, with Tim Hetherington, who passed away in Libya, right? Because they did that Restrepo, right?
Restrepo. Yep,
they did. Unbelievable, yeah.
So there's a TED Talk that he does that's really good, and he talks about the difference between a combat that a veteran has seen or a person that served in the military has seen, in relation to the suicide rates that we're seeing today through veterans and everything. And the post-World War II era, they saw much more combat than we ever saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, and when you put it in comparison. But their suicide rate was much lower when they came back, from the studies that have been done. And then almost the complete opposite from our generation, where combat relatively low, death toll relatively low from Iraq and Afghanistan when you compare it against World War II. Suicide rate is much higher. And his theory, and I tend to agree with it, is it goes back to the generations and what you were talking about with discipline and things like that. It's purpose.
Yeah,
we lack purpose today, and I think a lot of ways. And people were going around. My daughter, for instance, I remember I grew up knowing that I wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer, things like that. There was things that had purpose in your life, and that you wanted to serve others. Versus now, everybody wants to be, when growing up, I want to be a YouTuber, or I want to be these kind of things. So
a social media influencer is now like one of the top like things that people like want to be.
Yeah, so it's a much different value system that we live with today, and it's a much different mindset. And part of that, I think, really goes to the sense of purpose that we have. And I talk a lot about men's mental health, and that's where I think a lot of men struggle when it comes to mental health and what they're doing with their lives. Is if you lack that purpose, you tend to question yourself about what you're really doing in life and how you're serving others and how you're even look at yourself in the mirror.
Well, I like it's a great point. Like I look back at my father, for example. Well, my parents in general, but I'll say my father. So, like when my dad, I think my dad was 25 when he got married, and I think he was about 30 when he had me, something like that. But like when he was 25 or 26, like he was just like a bank manager. And he was able to buy like a 3-bedroom house, 2-car garage, mortgage, car payments. But he was able to and provide for a family like on one salary.
Yeah.
I think my mom at the time was like a travel agent. Back in the day when they actually had travel agents and gave like real tickets, paper tickets. But basically like a one family income, and to be able to live in like a big 3-bedroom house in Toronto with 2-car garage, 2 cars, it like you translate that to today. So my dad was 25, so that was like early to mid 70s, and then you translate that today, and like you can't buy a starter home in Toronto for less than like $1 million, and people can't even afford, the 20% down payment or something like that you would require. It's like, and that kills your purpose in life. Like when you can't afford to do anything, you feel like completely empowered, or I said that wrong.
Yeah,
completely lacking of any power.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been going through it now. I do own a home from back when I bought a long time ago, but I have a girlfriend now. We're looking at places. We're trying to build the foundation, and you look around, it's like, man, what used to probably, cost my mom and dad, $100,000 to buy now costs $2.2 million. It's just, it's really difficult to really try to plan out your future and plan out family and all that kind of stuff when you're looking at the prices around you. And I think that's another reason why birth rates are pretty much at an all-time low right now, and nobody wants to have children. Nobody wants to have that family life. Most people's children are pets.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so yeah,
I know how to play that game. Yeah. I know exactly, because it's prohibitively expensive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not easy. Okay, back another step. You said something really interesting. You were a sophomore in college when 9/11 happened. So September 11th, 2001. I was in my third year university. You were in your second.
Yep.
So the way you just described it a few minutes ago, you kind of described it like that moment was your call to action.
Yes.
Okay, can you walk me through that? Because so I was in Toronto working in a bank on the 40th floor of an office tower on September 11th, 2001. And then I remember the planes hitting. The first one hit. We were all sitting in the office watching. And then all the airspace in North America closed.
Yes.
And everyone was like, oh, there's planes coming for Toronto. There's planes coming for Boston. There's planes coming for LA. Like, I remember this panic. So we all took the emergency stairs down 40 flights. Like the elevators were like, everyone just and everyone walked out of downtown Toronto, like the downtown financial district.
Wow.
Like, no one took the subway.
Yeah.
No one took public. People just walked.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving and walking to my buddy's house, who lived near where I was working, and I called him. I was like, buddy, turn on the TV, like World War III is happening. Like, what's going on here? But being in Canada, and obviously not being the country that was attacked, there was a bit of separation. Like, holy shit! Like, Americans and Canadians are obviously brothers, but it wasn't. I didn't feel like a real sense of a call to action or a real responsibility to find the people who did it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what you went through when you were watching that play out.
Yeah. Again, I wasn't active duty at that point, but I had already signed the contract. I was once I graduated, I was going to be in, and I was in the dorm. I was in my dorm room my sophomore year. I might have been even skipping class. I can't remember.
You would never do that.
No.
Come on.
I may have been skipping class, but I remember being in my dorm room, and the first plane hit, and I saw it in my dorm rooms on my dorm room TV, and when the first plane hit, I remember walking to kind of a common area. And when I walked into the common area, that's right around the time the second plane hit. And at this point, I didn't have a cell phone. So I go back to my dorm room, and my mom's left 3 messages on my voicemail already. And so she kind of panicked because she knew I was associated with the military, and that, are they going to call you up now? What's going to happen? Because we live in a very military community. It's one of the biggest military communities in the world when you look at different bases and all the veterans and everybody that live
just around Virginia where you grew up.
So yeah, you have Norfolk Naval Base, you have Langley, you have a lot of different military bases, and then you top that with all the veterans that still live there. It's very big. So my mom works for a defense contractor as well, so she got almost immediate, like, we're going to war kind of thing. And so she panicked a little bit, and I kind of explained to her that the way my contract worked, I had to serve out the last 2 years in college and do my last 2 years and graduate before I could officially be part of the military. And so, but I knew at that time my life had changed moving forward in some way. I didn't know how at that point. I didn't know how the government was going to react and what we were going to get ourselves into. But I knew the cushy, serve out your 4 years of active duty service once you graduate, that my guidance counselor had sold me to get the ROTC scholarship, wasn't in play anymore.
Yeah.
So between my junior and senior year and actually between my sophomore and junior year of a college, I took the opportunity to go to airborne school in Fort Benning, Georgia. And so that's where you jump out of airplanes and get your wings. And I got that opportunity, fortunately, and that I went there right around the time that Pat Tillman, who was a NFL football player at the time, he was playing.
I remember his story. Yes,
he was going through basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, the same place I was going through airborne school.
Yeah.
So,
and he's the professional footballer that basically took himself out of playing professional football and went to Afghanistan.
He left millions of dollars on the table and decided that he was going to sign up for the military, go be a ranger, and go serve in Afghanistan. And so I my first real interaction with those types of individuals was when I went to airborne school between my sophomore and junior year, and that was the wake up call. But to that point, it felt like you were just playing Army. It wasn't you
like you're in a video game or something.
Yeah, exactly.
No consequences.
No consequences at that point. So then when you go to I go to airborne school that summer after 9/11, and it's real at that point. But the folks that you're, I'm ROTC. I still got a couple years before I got to graduate. But the people that are in your platoon, your chalk lines, everything else, they're Navy SEALs, they're Marines, they're guys that are getting their wings, so they can qualify to go to Ranger School and do all the things they got to do in combat.
So at that stage between your junior and senior year, when you were taking this like extra military training, basically.
Yeah.
Were you partnered up with people that had already served abroad? Like, were you like shoulder to shoulder with people who had already been in combat situations internationally?
Yeah. Yeah, and they had already been to small service in Afghanistan here, places like that, Iraq, and so or they had I'd served. We were led by some folks that had served previously in other theaters of conflict. So it wasn't until that point that really, oh shit, this is real. Yeah. Like I'm getting into something bigger, much bigger than myself.
So was there, did you have, obviously like a college football team will have like 100 players on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were any of your other college teammates like also in the military, or were you kind of alone on that front?
I was alone on that front. We had a few folks that were, we only had a few folks that were in ROTC at my college. So I was the only one that was in that route that was playing on the college football team. So I think my coaches definitely took a different stance on me having to miss a practice to go do training, so do those kind of different things. So, and then the team kind of responded very, very differently my senior year, knowing that we were still in the conflict and there was a high probability that when Jason graduates, Jason's going overseas.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was definitely a change in the dynamic of friendships and things like that moving forward.
So what was it like? Like, when I graduated from university, I was thrilled and excited to leave that part of my life behind happily. And then I was kind of ready for the next step, but I had no idea what that was going to be.
Yeah.
But it seems like your path was already drawn out. And did that give you anxiety or apprehension, or did that just fire you up?
A little bit of both, I think. The good thing was I didn't have to do what a lot of my friends were doing. Looking around, they were panicking, trying to find jobs and employment and what they were going to do post-college. For me, it was already drawn out. The time where it starts to panic starts to set in is around, I graduated in May of 2004. Right around August, I get orders to my first unit, and I'm not done graduating off my officer basic course, but you get orders to your first unit. I call up the commander of that first unit, and he's like, "Hey, we're going in October. We're going."
You knew that already.
Start packing. Start get your start packing. By September timeframe, we're gonna start loading up the connexes. So there's containers that they would load with the equipment that they were gonna send overseas that would meet us there when we got there with our day-to-day type stuff, extra uniforms, things we wanted to live with. So start packing this stuff for the container. We'll pack it in September, and then in October we're getting on a flight and we're going to Iraq. And didn't really at that point it was just a whirlwind. So graduated my officer basic course, and then like I said, had a limited amount of time actually spending time with soldiers here in the United States before I was serving with them in Iraq. And these are the folks you're expected to lead and really be a part of their day to day, making sure that they're taken care of. And I barely know them.
Sure.
So yeah,
that's terrifying. Was there any without, I don't want to get all political and stuff like that, but was there any kind of confusion on your part about like why you were going to Iraq, like when Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan? Or was there, because of course theaters of war are theaters of war. We could do a whole podcast on that discussion alone, but was there any kind of, you're trained not to question orders. Like you just go, right? Like,
yeah.
But did you ever think in the back of your, my problem is I think too much and I talk myself out of most stuff.
Yeah. I think that first deployment there wasn't a lot of questions. I went through a lot of stuff that first deployment, to be honest. I was stationed in Mosul, northern Iraq, which at that point was known as kind of the tip of the triangle of death when you looked at Mosul and Ramadi and Fallujah and Baghdad and all the areas. Mosul consistently got hit. And I was there right around Christmas time in 2004 when a suicide bomber walked into a dining facility and blew himself up. And at that point, and I think maybe through the years it's held up, but at that point it was the deadliest day for, United States military contractors and everybody else in country. That person had killed 22 people in that attack.
Jesus.
And I saw the aftermath of that. I, kind of was around the area when it happened. So saw that. So never really questioned our government to that point. It wasn't until later on when I got to the second, third deployment and you start looking around going, what the hell are we doing here, kind of thing. And you start having that conversation with yourself. It's what are we really doing? Because you started internally I'm not going to speak for every veteran that's out there, but the folks that had served in Iraq specifically, I know there was conversations about, we kind of know what's going to happen. The minute we pull out of this place is going to go to hell. Everybody's going to come charging back in, taking place where they wanted to, take place at, the Sunni, the Shia, and everybody else is going to do that.
Well, we saw that in Afghanistan just 3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
When the pullout has just gone totally to shit.
Yeah. So it was interesting after few years after I got out, obviously, we finally pull out of Iraq and we start seeing exactly what everybody I think had predicted at that point. We left a vacuum.
Yeah,
and everybody's going to come flying in to fill the holes. And I remember some of the first cities that fell. One of the first kind of was Mosul.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm remembering back to the first deployment, and I'm remembering what happened around Christmas with the suicide bomb. I'm remembering soldiers that had died in, a specific soldier that I had led at one point had died in a mortar round attack on a base in Mosul. And I'm thinking about all that stuff going, what did, you start questioning yourself, what did they give their lives for in this case? And that's when I think a lot of veterans, and where a lot of veterans, specifically combat veterans that are coming back from Iraq, struggle was, what were we doing? What were we accomplishing? And then I've lost friends. How do I get over the fact that I've lost a friend, but I was trying to do something right, and now the country's gone back to what it was, very much so in a lot of ways originally. So there was a lot of questions that led to a lot of issues mentally. I think that's the government thing definitely came into play later on.
Yeah. I think, we touched on it briefly with your grandfather, I think, right? Because, I feel like in World War II, there was no questioning, like Hitler had to be stopped.
Yes.
And obviously I've never served, and I'm speaking as a complete outsider.
Mm-hmm.
But I've read some history books. Like, it just feels like Hitler's march through Europe and bombing of London and complete domination of mainland Europe was a call to action that no one could afford to ignore.
Yes.
And obviously, millions of soldiers lost their lives on both sides. But you didn't feel like people were questioning the government's decision to do things. Like, this had to be done. That moral compass, was taking the Americans into the European theater to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, history books are always written by the victors, but it felt like that anyways. Whereas today, conflicts are driven by so much more than that, and whether it's natural resources or some other political issues that are on the table. I mean, look what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Like, you're just invading countries for no reason, apparently. Like what the fuck's going on? Like when people went to war, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, like it was like really a last ditch effort to do something. And now it just seems like such a willy-nilly decision. Like, I mean, just in the last few days, they're like, oh, let's attack Iran. Yeah. Because some soldiers were killed in Jordan. And obviously it's terrible that, American soldiers were just killed in Jordan by a drone attack by rebels that are probably sponsored by Iran. Yeah. If you're reading the BBC or whatever the main news is of the day. But starting a war with a whole nother country, like that kind of talk is terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, and then you're at the point now in this generation is who's going to fight the war. I mean, it's you're talking about a military right now that has been the recruiting numbers aren't being met. Yeah, half the population that we have right now couldn't meet height, weight, fitness standards. Who's willing to actually step up and volunteer for this kind of stuff? I mean, when you have World War II, what you mentioned with Hitler, there was the boogeyman. Everybody knew when they volunteered, they were going after that. We were going to save the world in that case. For in a lot of people's minds, they were saving the United States. They were saving the world. When 9/11 happened and people signed up at the military and volunteered, the boogeyman was Osama bin Laden. But everything got skewed when all of a sudden you were going to fight Osama bin Laden and get the bad guy that did these attacks, and then all of a sudden you're going to Iraq.
Yeah, that's the disconnect for me.
Yeah.
And looking at it 20 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been this has, for you and I in our 40s, like this has, and obviously you were boots on the ground, but this way of using the U.S. military has dominated our entire adult lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were there.
Yeah. I've had friends that have questioned why we have we definitely should have a National Guard, we should have a strong military presence, but I have friends that are, that beg the question, why do we have a standing military that at any moment the government can just pick up and drop somewhere? We should have strong borders. We should have the strong military presence that allows us to be safe here, but to just be able to pick up anybody in a unit or multiple units or our whole United States Army and drop them in a country and go to war without really the backing that you saw from a World War II. I have friends that question, why are we spending a lot of money on, these standing armies and all this military equipment when a lot of the nations around us can't stand toe to toe with us?
Or even, your daughter is using textbooks that are 20 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you look at the schooling system or the healthcare system or the roads in the United, there's a lot of places that money could go. Obviously. So yeah, I mean, these are hot button topics, that are being debated every day. And it's
that fun military industrial complex. That's what it is. And I got to say, I work for one. I work for a defense contractor. So, but it's wild where you see money going to.
Well, I mean, so what your experience and traveling, into Iraq and then later to Afghanistan, right?
No, I just did Iraq.
You just did Iraq.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. But you have to understand, like, so many other countries, expect the United States to do stuff like that so they don't have to.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Canadians are a great example. Like we have our own standing army, but it's very small.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard, it's like, very highly skilled and elite, right? But it's small.
Yeah.
And we can go in and do some small things, but we need other nations to like team up with.
Yes.
That's what has been described to me. I don't know anyone in the military there.
Yeah.
But the Canadians definitely rely on the Americans to step on the gas when the gas needs to be stepped on.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of countries all around the world that, need that, but then those countries don't really chip in. And then you're leaving all these, young 18, 19-year-old, mainly men like you were, to go off and go to countries. And then you're like, well, why are we here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying. I mean, the future is going to be interesting. That's the best I can say it. Yeah. And how we're going to deal with international conflict, and then kind of not only deal with international conflict, but be able to kind of look back and say, we shouldn't be spending money on the areas, like you said, like, my daughter's in school, making sure she has all the right things to, that she needs, the protections that she needs with what's going on in the United States with a lot of different things. So, it's going to be interesting. That's the best way I can put it.
Well, it's the other thing that's the most interesting too is just how the media covers these events, right? So I worked for the New York Times covering China for 10 years, like from 2002 or 3 to like 2012, and when I was living in Shanghai. And obviously the paper had a certain angle on China that they, wanted to work, and the writers were free to write whatever they wanted. But, there was just so much negativity all the time. And towards the end, like when I got out of journalism, I just felt like, it was becoming more about following an agenda than just reporting the news. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like, conflict, and the military has been pulled into these agendas and into these political battles as a political tool, instead of a weapon of necessity. And it's been terrifying to watch this kind of play out. And you were there.
It's definitely difficult. And then you start throwing in all the other organizations like Border Patrol and some of these other agencies that are out there right now, and what they're doing, and what their original assignment was versus what they're doing today, and all those kind of different things. Everything gets real skewed and real fuzzy real quick. And I don't think we've done a great job. The media definitely hasn't done a great job of educating the United States just populace of, this is where your dollars are going specifically, and then this is what the plan is. This is the agenda. It's all, when you listen to a politician speak, it's all one-liners, and it's the thing's built for social media now. It's sound bites. It's exactly that. And so what I would hope for in the future, especially with podcasts and some of the other things, is let's sit down people, and let's sit these people down that want to have office, and say, all right, well, what's your plan? We can sit down here for 2 hours. Tell me what your plan is, and let me make an educated decision on whether I should vote for you or not based on your plan, versus just taking a side one way or the other, right or left, because that's what I've been told to do, or that's the way my family's always voted, or something like that. And then let's make educated decisions versus just the media told me this, or I just watch Fox News and I don't watch anything else, and Fox News is telling me to do this, and this is the bad guy, and we're just so divided because of the way the information's flowed down to the general population, I think, at this point.
It's true. Yeah. I think I would love to see, this is my dream. Are you ready? Yeah. I would love to see every political candidate, maybe globally, have to go on the Joe Rogan show. Now look, I don't love Joe Rogan. I don't think he's right about everything. I don't agree with him on every topic. But you know what? Over a 3-hour period, you get to know who someone is. Not Joe Rogan, his guest, right? Yeah. Like, he provides a platform for you to get to know what other people are thinking. And it's free flow, and it really goes. And I remember the presidential candidate of the moment, Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy. Yep. Yeah, he was on the Joe Rogan show like a couple weeks ago, and he came off and he did an interview, and he's just like, no one's let me talk that long before. Yeah. And you don't have to agree with his political stance on anything. You don't have to agree with him on Afghanistan or Syria or Russia or Ukraine. But he got to talk for 3 hours, and now you know more than you did before. Exactly. And I think that is like what we should be striving for as an educated populace.
Agreed. 100%. I mean, I've talked about that exact situation, because I think Bernie Sanders.
Oh, Bernie was on a couple of years ago too. Yeah, that was great.
And I listened. I mean, and there's parts where you can say, hey, if you're really listening with an open mind and really trying to learn about the person, instead of just going in with what I think a lot of our issues in the United States now is, and nobody wants to actually have a civil conversation. Yeah. It goes into it with, here's my hard stance, there, you have your hard stance, we're just going to argue the entire time, versus I'm open to what you're going to say. I may not agree with everything you're going to say, but I want to understand you so that I can at least understand where you're coming from. Yeah. People don't want to do that anymore.
Well, my dad lives in Palm Springs, California, and I won't say where exactly. There's the address. I know. And he used to have a Super Bowl party every year. And he's got a nice house, and it's on a golf course, and people come over, and he had a barbecue, and he loves to cook and stuff like this. And he stopped doing it because people were just talking politics the whole time at the Super Bowl, and people were like getting visibly angry. Yeah. Like, not confrontational, but it wasn't good, right? Yeah. And he just said, fuck it. Like, he just stopped having this party. Yeah. Because it was about the Super Bowl, and people were gambling, and like, who's going to score next, and combinations of points, and like, it was a fun night, right? Yeah. And he had to stop it because people were getting too politically, charged around the Super Bowl. Yeah. Because everyone was just talking politics on the sidelines, and it just made him sick.
It's weird how everybody now, how people identify themselves today. They're either Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative, those kind of things, versus just I'm a knowledgeable voter. I want to be informed. It's people are taking sides, and I firmly believe nobody should be a fan of a politician.
Fair enough. Absolutely. Yeah.
Nobody should be a fan. I mean, you should understand what the person is bringing to the table, and you can definitely like their policies and like what they're throwing out there that they want to do for plan wise. But to just be a fan that doesn't really understand what the plan is, and just because it's the opposite of what the opposite of the candidate you're a fan of, you just want to vote for that person no matter what, and you don't. I think we're just gotten too far into everybody's taken a side. It's a hard stance. And now where does that leave the individuals today that really want to understand, wouldn't really want to grow and have candidates that pitch different ideas and do different things that can help our country? Instead, now we're stuck with the fandoms.
The fandoms. That's a good point. Like, I was joking with someone the other day. I was like, I went to university, and in university, one of the things you had to do in class sometimes is you would write an essay about a certain topic, and you'd have to take a position on it and defend it. And then when you got your essays back, you would get a score. And then sometimes the professor, would ask you and someone else who wrote the opposite paper, taking the opposite stance and defending a different argument, to then debate each other using each other's arguments. And it used to teach you like that even if you think, apples are orange, you have to be ready to listen to someone who disagrees, and you have to be respectful and hear them out. And then you can agree to disagree. But, I was joking with someone, I was like, I want a refund on my university education because they taught me how to think critically and how to listen to different opinions and how to be open-minded and how to, and how to understand a topic from multiple angles. And I don't get to use any of it anymore because everyone's just busy shouting at each other. Yes. It's insane.
It is. It's insanity. And then, I think that's one of the things that when I've traveled the world, at least, it's interesting to see the different. There's definitely differences in the way people govern and different countries govern and how politics are handled but when you get down to that community level, everybody wants the same thing, and I think we're so wrapped around national level politics that we're forgetting about what actually matters, and that's what's your hometown, like what voting from that perspective of who's going to do the best job for my city, my county, whatever, my board of education, those kind of different things. We're forgetting about those critical positions and just thinking so much on the national level. And we're fans of, a specific presidential candidate versus being knowledgeable about what the individual that wants to fix your potholes at the local level is even trying to do. So when I've traveled to places like the Amazon jungle, they think opposite. It's the national level stuff sometimes is a little too big for them, where they want the mayor of their little village to be able to provide, and if he can't, he's going to get booted.
Yeah.
And so we're thinking our thought processes are just a little different here. And I think when you talk about purpose and you talk about the ability to turn things around and change, and the ability to impact change and affect change, we have to do it at the local level. And I think that's where, when people start to feel like they're hopeless or they're useless, they're thinking sometimes on too much of a broader scale, instead of thinking, well, what could I do just in my local community? Could I run for office? Could I run for school board? Could I start a nonprofit? Could I do these things that could just impact at the local level? And then the more we do things at the local level, I would hope that the groundswell would take care of itself at a more federal.
Yeah. You hope. You hope.
Yeah.
So I had a guest in here a couple of weeks ago, David Butow. He's a professional photographer, and I actually met him in China in May 2008. We were both covering a horrific earthquake that happened in Western China, and he was based here in Los Angeles and was in China for a few months before the Olympics in 2008, and we bumped into each other covering this earthquake, and it was horrific, and we kind of exchanged numbers, and then something happened where our life was in danger because of an aftershock, and we ended up like running. And I never saw him again. But then we reconnected now that I'm here, and he was covering the January 6th incursions at the Capitol building in D.C. In 2001. January 6th, 2001, I believe.
That the ones that just recently,
where the Capitol building was attacked and they were trying to...
was that the 20... I don't think that was 2001. Was that
2021?
Maybe. I'm trying to remember the year now. Yeah, time flies.
Because the election was... the election where Biden beat Trump was November 2020.
Yes.
And then January 2021. Yeah.
I think you're right, yeah.
And I remember he was telling me, and you can watch it, it's on YouTube too, but like he was telling me like how like he was photographing all these people so angry, frustrated, and trying to basically explain that the election was false and that the results of the election shouldn't be processed through Congress, which was going to happen on that day. And, he's a pretty open-minded person, and he's traveled the world and been in conflict zones. Like he was in Afghanistan and Iraq as well as a photographer. And he just felt like this kind of like embarrassment that like the whole world is watching this unfold, and we're supposed to be this like shining beacon of democracy. And I remember he wasn't angry, but it was just like this sense of just chaos.
Yeah.
It really kind of like, I think it really affected him. He made a beautiful book about it called Brink. And it covers like all of President Trump's years, including the lead up to his election in 2016, and then right through till the January 6th. And he'd been kind of following this whole movement, and he just remembered just how profoundly like disturbed he was by it, and I just found that, because he's American, like it's the same as you. It's like it's happening on your land, right?
Yes,
I'm a visitor.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a foreigner. Like I will not be voting this November. Like I'm not allowed to vote. Like, like I'm an outsider, but I'm still here and I still have to watch it.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, I'm not going to be as emotionally attached to probably as someone who is an American, who does vote, who does take that stuff seriously. But it's like at some stage, it's like, this isn't even working anymore.
Yeah. You definitely start questioning that. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? I tend to agree. It's I don't know. I've got a lot of friends that think a lot of different things, and we've had a lot of different conversations about what's the worth of a two-party system. You start questioning, and you're trying to think critically about it. Obviously, you're trying to like open kind of your ears to and your mind to what could we do, and the best thing that we've come up with to this point is what I described earlier is I think if we can refocus everybody on how to help your local community and grow your local community and do the things there, because, you drive around most of America and it's, there's a lot of small towns that are dying and things like that. And it's just, how do we have a hometown type movement where we can impact change and really give people purpose, because I think that's where we're lacking as a country, is just a sense of direction, a sense of purpose.
So I lived in Switzerland briefly recently. I became a resident of Switzerland for a very short time, and I remember obviously I had lived in China for 18 years, so most people know who the president of China is, like Xi Jinping. He declared himself emperor for life, and most people know who Joe Biden is, current president of the United States. But I lived in Switzerland. I didn't even know who the president of Switzerland was.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know if they had a president or a prime minister.
Yeah.
And I loved it because, well, first of all, I can't read German and I can't read French or Italian.
Yeah.
So all the local news, which I'm sure they were debating local politics and this kind of stuff, I couldn't read.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch any Italian, French, or German television. And I felt so blissfully at peace being so ignorant and I didn't have to question it because everything worked.
Yeah.
The roads were good. The trains were on time. The schools are fine. Work was fine. Like everything worked. So you didn't have to know who all these fucking people are all the time and what their names are and what they're running for, because there was just the basic needs were taken care of.
Yeah.
And it made life so much easier.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's where I've got friends that want that blissful ignorance. They want to be as far away from those conversations as possible. They don't watch the news. They everything they follow on social media is of interest to them, whether it's gym, something athletic. They want to be as far away from the political conversation as possible because it's less stressful. And that's another thing. You're dealing with a lot of mental health crisis in the United States specifically, and how much is discontent and the way we're living and the way the media portrays us and all this kind of stuff really, impacting people's mental health. So
massively, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's just, there's a lot going on, and like you mentioned, the word of the day I feel like is chaos.
And who's profiting from the fucking chaos? Like that's the real, follow the money.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's okay. So let's take a step back and get back to you. So you're in October 2003. You're about to deploy in 2004.
Yeah.
You're about to deploy for Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you feeling at this stage? You're 21, 22 years old.
Yeah.
23. Are you feeling like invincible, like you're part of the U.S. military and we're going to go fucking stomp some heads? Or are you feeling like, fuck, people are dying out there, like this is terrifying? Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of terrifying at that point. I mean, I think from my perspective, like from my family's raising and things like that, it's kind of a sense of duty in a lot of ways. And then the masculine side of the house is like, you're a man, go, kind of things. But there's definitely fear. I mean, if you're not a little bit scared, who knows? I think that fear dwindles the more experience you get. But that first one was definitely, what do I get myself into? And then kind of compounded upon it when we're flying from Kuwait into Iraq, and then from Iraq we flew from the one base near Baghdad into Mosul, and as we're landing, we're getting shot at. And
so your first stop was Bagram Air Force Base, that's Afghanistan. Sorry, sorry, you were in Baghdad.
It was Balad Air Base, and it's Camp Anaconda for everybody that knows. So it's just north of Baghdad, and that's where our battalion level headquarters was at. So they wanted to meet us before we went to our actual last stop and where we were going to be.
So this was October 2004. So when the invasion started, it was March or April 2002, I think, right?
I think so.
That was when the invasion of Iraq happened.
Yeah.
So you were walking into this 18 months hot. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Things were built up by that point, and things had already happened, obviously. So I knew flying into Mosul was a tip of triangle of death, like kind of thing, because the news was, that's what it's called. And so
very catchy, sells a lot of newspapers.
Yeah. So we land, and as we're landing in a little prop airplane because it was just a small unit. And we land, and we're getting shot at as we land, and I'm just like, oh shit, I got to do a year of this kind of thing. And then we land, we're getting unpacked, we're putting stuff up and getting ourselves situated, starting to talk to the former unit that was there, that had been there for a year before us. So,
they like debrief you before?
You're getting a transition with them for about 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so they're telling you all the stuff that they went through for the last year. So you're getting...
It's got to be horrifying.
So yeah, they're like, yeah, we got this going on. We had this. And so you're hearing all the stories they've got. We just landed and experienced part of that. And then, you're starting to get mortared at night. That's the first time the first time I'd ever gotten woken up from gunfire was sleeping in we had container units, like small little 20-foot containers that we shared with a roommate. And we had a special operations base kind of located behind us, and they got into a firefight, and we're sending Apaches are flying overhead, Hellfire missiles,
middle of the night,
and the mortar rounds are flying. You're just, I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Then by, first 90 days are normally the most dangerous when you're in country because you're brand new. You don't know the lay of the land. You don't know what's going on. And then the last 90 days are also dangerous because that's the time frame where you're counting down 89 more days home.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
It's like when you're driving, your best chance of getting in an accident is like within a mile of your home, right? Because that's when your defenses are at their lowest, because you feel like you're at home and this is your neighborhood and you feel safe.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's that 6-month time period, then the year-long deployment where it's just work and you're doing things as usual. But you eventually do start to get used to the sound of mortar rounds coming in. You can say, you're in bed, and I can remember just laying there going, that's not too close. Back to sleep, kind of thing.
Oh, they haven't figured out exactly where we are yet.
Yeah.
I'll just sleep a little while longer.
And then, like, there's times where you can hear things that are closer, and you're like, all right, maybe I should get up and go into the bunker, kind of thing. So yeah, those kind of things definitely happened over that course of that deployment. You get used to it. And then there were times where the military would let, at that point, third country nationals come on and sell, burnt DVDs and things like that of TV shows that soldiers, would buy and stuff, and give haircuts and stuff like that. There would be specific days where none of them would show up to work, and you're like, we're getting hit today.
Oh, because they would tell the locals that not to go to the office.
Either that or the locals heard through the rumors and stuff, like something was going to happen on base that day. We were going to mortar or something, so they wouldn't show up.
So if the local guy from Mosul that doesn't come to do your haircut, if he's late or doesn't show up, go to the bunker.
Yeah, you're something's happening today, kind of thing. Or like, I'm waiting for my DVD to come in that I wanted from the Burt DVD land and his little shop, and none of them show up. Yeah, something's going to happen. So went through that year and saw a lot of different things and experienced a lot. And then my second deployment was specifically a deployment that really, that was a lot, because we did convoy escorts. So basically shipments of equipment and everything would come into Kuwait. And then a logistics convoy, basically tractor trailer type trucks, would pick up the equipment that was in Kuwait to take into Iraq.
Oh, by road?
By road.
Oh, geez.
And so we would meet. There's a lot of stuff that was taken by plane, but it was more cost effective to travel by ground. And then what a lot of people don't realize is the government, we have military assets that drive the tractor trailers with the equipment in a lot of cases, but the government also contracts out third country nationals, people from Croatia and Africa and all kinds of different places, to drive unarmored trucks for us with our equipment, with our strawberry chocolate milk and all that fun stuff, into Iraq for us. So our convoys could be 30 to 40 trucks long, and 20 or 30 of those trucks are not even U.S. military. They're third country national.
And what is that? It's just cheaper to hire a truck driver who's not American or not in the military?
Basically more cost effective to get more equipment across, and then I don't know what other considerations they made for it, but we would meet them at the border of Iraq and Kuwait. At that point, it was a place called Navstar. And then we'd meet them there, and then we'd figure out, mission briefs, all this, security briefs, what route we're taking, all that stuff. And then we'd go into the country. And then I think I had one of the most missions and most miles of my specific unit. I did 27 trips into Iraq, and that covered, a couple thousand miles. I've seen more of Iraq than I've ever wanted to. More of Iraq than I ever saw the United States.
How terrifying is that to be on an open road and to be such a target? Because they are absolutely waiting for you.
Oh yeah, and the interesting thing about that whole thing is, that I 27 missions. My convoys got hit 6 times with IEDs, a couple times with small arms fire. At that point, they had EFPs, which are called explosively foreign projectiles, which basically they perfected an IED into basically made a tube, a cannon that would shoot the IED, and it was more directional and had more force. So it
like a bazooka or like a missile launcher for a layman like me.
Yeah, so it could blow. So instead of blowing out and up and fragmented, much like an IED, it was more direct hit into the truck, and it tended to pierce the armor better. And so they would get so good with it, they'd start aiming, to get the driver and the gunner and of your truck and everything else. So they were everything that we did in country. A lot of times the insurgency would do something to react to that, and they would learn our ways, learn our tactics, techniques, and procedures. And then next time you come through that area, they'd adjust to what we did last time, and hope that worked better, because they now know how we do things, because they would they'd throw fake IEDs on the road. I came across it one time where a dog had wires running out of its butt, and it was, if EOD shows up, it's not an actual bomb. They just wanted to see, I guess, how we stopped and handled it.
And you knew you were being watched.
Yeah, you're being watched in some way, and you're hoping that eye in the sky, the American eye in the sky guys that are up there are being able to track things and do the things they need to do, but they can't track everything at once. And so, yeah,
it's terrifying. So your first deployment, you must have had a lot of, like, you must have been nervous. You must have had some anxiety. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
yeah.
But when we watch movies, and this is again, this is terrible that this is my only reference, but for 99% of people out there who haven't been in conflict, that's all we have, right? Is like whatever we see on the news or whatever we see in a movie, like we always see, guys hunting for, the top officials of Iraq or something like that. Like, what was your first year there spent actually doing?
Oh, so yeah, there's only a small percentage of those guys that are doing the fun movie stuff. Like Hurt Locker, I'm going to go down in history as saying that's the worst military movie of all time. EOD guys don't go running around Baghdad by themselves. It's just things like that. Hollywood takes to another level, obviously. There's a lot of good movies that Hollywood's made recently that have had military people on set that have done a lot of the advising and stuff. So somebody who's served in the military and has handled weapons and done all that kind of stuff, you can pick out the inconsistencies pretty quickly, and that turns a lot of veterans off.
Yeah.
But a lot of us don't do that kind of stuff. I was specifically logistics, so my job wasn't to go out and find the bad guy. My job was at an airfield and in a staging area, making sure that flights came in and that the equipment got off those flights and delivered to wherever they needed to be delivered to, and that those convoys, the same convoys I escorted the second time, the first deployment, I was responsible for making sure they got ushered in, that equipment got removed, that needed to be removed and taken to whatever units and wherever else. And then the stuff that was moving forward on to another base got moved forward and was in the right, areas and stuff like that. So it was all logistics-based stuff.
But you're still getting attacked every night.
You're still getting attacked. It's just you're not doing any of the attacking. So
you're just defending yourself.
You're just defending yourself and trying to make sure you don't get yourself killed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, like, did you ever go into Mosul? Like, did you ever leave the base? Like, was there opportunities like that, or were you really just managing what was coming in and coming out?
There was one or two times that I got a chance to go on convoys into Mosul and around the surrounding area. The 25th Infantry Division at that time was the unit that was the main unit there in Mosul. So I got a chance a couple times to go outside the wire. And it's just funny because there's very much even in the military, while you're there, there's still this dichotomy of the folks that go outside the wire and the folks that stay inside the wire.
Yeah.
And it's very, it's masculine machismo type stuff where it's like, well, we go outside the wire, all you do is sit on base all day and do nothing. So you get a lot of that competitive type stuff. But I think
you're dealing with A-type personalities. I mean, you're dealing with some of the most aggressive, fit, well-trained human beings on the planet.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so, and you're young and you're full of testosterone and all that stuff. But I think as you grow older, as people grow through their career, there goes from that level of thinking to more of an appreciation of what each other did. And so, it was interesting to see even the way I reacted the second deployment is, the second deployment, I was the guy that went outside the wire. And, the way I was looking and viewing at people that got a chance to stay on base all day and go play softball tournaments and go do the things because they had basically a regular schedule. Because that first deployment, I had a regular schedule for the most part. And, I woke up at this time, I went into the office, I did this, and this. We had to make sure these flights got on. Things changed throughout the day because of the way logistics changed. But for the most part, you could predict your day, besides getting ordered and all that fun stuff. The second deployment was really unpredictable because you were leaving outside the wire at different times. You were going to different places in Iraq. You didn't know what to expect on the road. You couldn't predict when an IED was going to blow up on you or you're going to get small fire. When somebody was going to take a wrong turn and you had to go wheeling back in. All those kind of different things were so unpredictable. So it was very much a big difference between my first and second deployment. And then I had one last deployment, my third deployment. I was in company command, so I was a commander at that point. So that was a much different because now you're taking care of people, making sure that they have the resources and everything they need to be able to get their job done that are under your command versus being out in the roads and doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, each deployment was very different.
So you're again, so you're 23, 24, you go out to Iraq, you're out there for 12 months. what was it like coming back to the United States between your first deployment and your second deployment? Like, because I mean, I don't think we've talked about this, but you weren't injured during your first deployment.
No.
You came back safely, right? So you went out there an able-bodied soldier. You came back an able-bodied soldier.
Yeah.
What was it like for you, to be stateside in between those deployments, and what were you seeing as a soldier? Because you were still serving.
Yeah. That's another whole nother interesting topic. Is the first deployment still, the remnants of 9/11 are still fresh in America's mind, and you when you go to the airport, like when I deployed that first time, we're in Atlanta's airport. We're walking to go, in line in our uniforms to go to the plane to go fly from Atlanta through Germany into Kuwait. And then as you're walking through, people are stopping what they're doing, standing up and clapping, giving you standing ovations, all that stuff in the Atlanta airport. By the time I got to the third deployment, people would barely look over their newspaper at you, doing the same thing.
Yeah, there was definitely like a war fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah. From the population. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for a soldier.
Yeah. And so after that first deployment, I only had 8 months. I came back from the first deployment and was told literally a month after I got back, I was going to another unit that was deploying 7 months later. So I had 8 months between the first and second deployment. And most of that 8 months, and this is what I don't think a lot of people appreciate with the military community, they see the deployments and they see the number of times they've gone to Iraq and Afghanistan. But what I think a lot of the American population and a lot of people don't understand is that time between, that year between each one of those deployments, you're spinning up for the next deployment. You're going TDY training. You're out of town for training exercises. You're not getting a chance to spend as much family life as you'd like to and do the things you'd like. So I think even when you condense that down from a year between deployments down to 8 months, I had even a shorter amount of time to really adjust my mindset, get back into just day-to-day living, and then still be training up for that gun truck, because that was, we were turning a unit that didn't have that skill set into a unit that needed that skill set to be able to go overseas and do their job. So we were training people on new weapon systems, all kinds of different things. So that 8 months was just so quick because of all the things we needed to do to get ready. And so I wasn't really cognizant of what was going on around me as far as, just general population. I knew my family was proud of me and what I was doing and all that fun stuff. But as far as what was going on in the news and everything else, just was a blip on the radar.
When you're in Iraq for your first deployment, you're in a high stress environment. You're being attacked on a daily basis, and in the evenings. You've got anxiety, you've got stress, you've got adrenaline, you've got it all, right?
Yeah.
So, what was your mental state like when you came back for that 8 months in between the first and the second deployment, or did they just keep you busy enough that you didn't come off that high? Because, like, I can imagine. And again, this is going to sound stupid, but
yeah,
but like I make adventure TV shows, right?
Yeah.
And when you're off climbing a mountain or your life is kind of like a little in danger, but not obviously in a theater of war.
Yeah.
You're on a huge rush and you're on a huge high, and then when you come back into like normal life,
yeah,
it fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And people don't, people treat you shitty, and it's just like, but I just climbed this mountain and no one cares.
Yeah.
Or you're dealing, and then you're back dealing with editors and dealing with broadcast executives and all these people that don't care that you just climbed this mountain and survived and filmed this great thing in 4K, and the whole team did it, and you're just running into people living their daily lives that don't give a shit about what you just did.
Yeah.
Like, and then you got to go out and do it again.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, I think that you get a little bit frustrated, and I think your temper runs a little bit shorter, your patience is a little bit shorter with regards to the things people complain about. You can sit in Starbucks and somebody's complaining about not having enough foam on their latte, and you're like, "This is the problems we're fucking dealing with right now.
These are the problems you're saving.
Yeah.
That Americans can actually have. Yeah. You're abroad so that people can complain about their foam.
Yeah. So I mean, it's those kind of things that you kind of grow. Your patience grows short for. I don't think it's really until, and I think this is where the struggle really starts. It started for me, and I think it happens with a lot of veterans. It's when you finally get out of the military.
So after your third deployment, and you know, like you're what, you're retired?
Yeah. Well, at that point, I was done with my contractual agreement with the military. I had done all the years that I needed to from my contract that I had signed with them. I had even re-upped the contract halfway through to do more time because I felt like I wasn't done yet. But it was that time when I got out, and now you're in it. Now you're in society. You're no longer, you're trying to find your identity. And this is where a lot of, I hope a lot of veterans identify with what I'm going to say right here. And because I feel it myself, is you're this 18 to 21, 22-year-old individual that just graduated college, just graduated high school. You join the military. You're in the military for anywhere, let's just say between 4 to 10, 15, 20 years. Like, just, you're in that window. Now you get out and you've grown more, you've experienced more life, you've done all these things. You've identified yourself though as a soldier.
And also too, like, you've witnessed horrific things.
Yes.
Like that, like, let's not underestimate the trauma of seeing people die in front of you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it must be horrifying.
So now you're questioning, now you're not only dealing with what you have post-traumatic stress, but you also have this, what you were alluding to earlier, is a lack of traumatic stress.
Yeah, because you're living with it every day, and then when it's not there, it's terrifying.
Yeah, now it's too quiet in my house. I got to have a fan going or something going in my house so I can sleep, because I'm used to generator noise and everything else going on. So if it gets too quiet, now I can't sleep. And now, like, you're fighting, especially in young men specifically, and maybe a lot of men. Now you're finding ways to cope, and you're doing it in unhealthy ways to try to find the adrenaline again.
So are you talking about like
drugs,
violence or drugs and alcohol?
Alcohol, all those kind of things that are unhealthy coping mechanisms that you're leaning into now to try to replace the high that you were getting when you were in the military. And then you're dealing with that, trying to replace the high, but you're also dealing with looking yourself in the mirror and going, well, who am I now in society? Who am I as a person? I was a soldier. I'm a veteran. And this is where I think a lot of veterans lean in, maybe too hard. I don't know. That's just maybe my own opinion on the veteran status, because they don't know how else to identify themselves as an individual. And that makes it hard, because now if you don't know who you are, what you want to be, your purpose, again, with purpose, all those things, it makes it very difficult to adjust back into our society today.
I can't imagine how hard that is.
Yeah, and the military, I'll be honest, the military might be doing a better job now, but it definitely didn't do a good job when I was getting out. It was, here's your DD-214, your final papers. It says you're no longer, you're out of service, you're your honorary discharge kind of thing. And here's a resume writing class. Now, good luck to you.
And how old were you when you got out?
I had just turned 30 when I got out. So my entire 20s was basically military, Iraq, training for Iraq, doing all those kind of things. Got out my last day was a 10-year anniversary of 9/11. It was 9/11, 2011 was my last day, my ETS day, my end of time of service in the military. And then got out. Fortunately, I had found a job pretty quick as doing business development for a military company that did contracts. And so was still around people that spoke the language. Where it gets really to be a struggle for a lot of people is I stayed in a military community. I stayed in a military type job. I was still speaking the language people. I could connect with people that had experienced things that I'd experienced. Where it gets difficult is when Billy from Podunk Town, Iowa, goes back to Podunk Town, Iowa, and there's 0 people there that have ever experienced what he experienced, and he's got nobody to relate to.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, we're comparing apples and oranges, but I'm going to do my best here.
Yeah,
like, I'm assuming that every day you are juiced with a fight or flight mentality. Yeah. in working in a war zone, and you have to psychologically, artificially prepare yourself for that level of intensity on a daily basis in order to be a professional soldier. Mm-hmm. And you have to be ready to fight basically 24/7, and that's not a normal existence. So you've mentally juiced yourself up to this like incredible level of adrenaline and intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not imagine doing that for 1 year, 6 months, 10 years like you had done. And then what if you come back to the United States and you have to wear that title of veteran or civilian, and you're in an anti-war environment?
Yeah.
You know, people who don't appreciate your service, or people who question your service, or people who question you for wanting to go abroad or something like that. Like that's what I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that. So I just went through that very experience, and it's so far removed from my time in service, but it still impacted me. So my girlfriend and I made a funny reel, and she had posted a picture of me in 2005 versus her in 2005, and things like that. And she posted a picture of me in the military. And the backlash that I saw from the military picture and me and her saying that I was in Iraq was just something that I wasn't expecting. It was baby. I got the baby killer. I got you killed families and blah blah blah. And it was just like, wow, like it impacted me mentally. Fortunately, I feel like I've done enough work and you know, having my girlfriend and having my family around me to be able to be supportive of me and help me through that kind of situation. But it definitely was like, wow. I mean, I get that, going back to our part of our original piece of the conversation, I get that there was a lot of questions behind Iraq and why we were there.
Yeah.
But
at the moment there weren't.
Yeah.
And people were cheering you at the airport as you went to go fight the good fight.
Yeah.
And now what, 15 years later, people are shitting on you on social media. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. And so it's very difficult. So you go back to that, and now people are questioning not only what their again, it goes back to what did I do? What was my existence? But now you're also still going back to, well, I lost friends to that war, or, you know, Afghanistan and those kind of things. And what does that do to you psychologically when now you're having to question why you lost a friend and what your real purpose was over there? And it becomes very convoluted, and it can send you down a spiral.
Yeah.
And that spiral is hard to get out of. And a lot of times, and especially with the military community, and this is where I really like to harp on it, if you're in that spiral, it gets very easy to just give up. And in a lot of cases, people will take their own lives. I've had, since the day I got out until this year, I guess so it's what now, 13 years, I've had at least 15 individuals that I either know personally that served in the military, or former soldiers commit suicide. I've had 2 twin brothers kill themselves.
That's more than one a year.
It's more than one a year. I had 2 twin brothers. They were served in my unit together. They killed themselves 1 week apart. Imagine the family going through that. I mean, it's just, we have to figure that out. And we're doing a terrible job of figuring out how do we resolve that issue. And the best piece of advice I can give people, because I was there, I've been there, I had my own plan back in 2016 on how I was going to do it. And I got out of it because I reached out. I reached out to my family. I reached out to mental health advocates and people like that to get me out of that spiral, because I was deep in it. And I think if we can figure out a way how to get people help they need well before, and find the origin and treat it differently than just tossing a blanket over it, because I think PTSD can tend to be treated the same across the board, and everybody's PTSD is going to be different. Some people's PTSD, most traumatic thing that ever happened in their lives, I tend to joke about it, but it's not a joke. It could be they lost their car chapstick, and that's the most traumatic thing that ever happened to them in their lives, versus somebody who's seen dead bodies, done bad things to people. So we got to just figure it out.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's no, I mean, how incredibly fortunate do you feel to have had at least some support network around you, in 2016 when you were at your darkest, right? Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think the veteran community and what's happening in the United States today, we talk about chaos. We talked about that already. We talked about how fast-paced everything moves. You go from all that to now you're lost in this fast-paced system where everything moves fast. The news moves fast. The world moves fast. So that service that you had, great, grand, wonderful. Thank you for your service. What have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
What are you doing tomorrow? Like those kind of things. And it's really hard to recover from that. And you can really just feel lost.
I'm amazed. Obviously, as a visitor here in the United States, like I'm amazed at how the veteran community isn't pulled in to the capitalist business ecosystem in a healthier way. Because I just feel like, because I mean, like, again, you could take COVID, for example,
Yeah.
right? Like I've just spent, way too much time doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been through war.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't, been in life-threatening situations, or at least was, in a combat theater, right? Like I was just kind of unemployed and not doing enough for way too long. And again, I'm making silly comparisons, but that idle time is the dangerous time.
Yes.
And I definitely felt depressed at stages, and it didn't really go too far beyond that. But you have to imagine, like, if these people can all come back and work and find some new purpose in making a living, in maybe starting a family, but at least working and having like an employment community of other veterans, it would make a huge difference. I feel like so many like, okay, we live in Los Angeles, like you drive out past the cemetery out there and there's veterans like living.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, how are people not reaching out in the local community and getting these people employed back on their feet? It boggles my mind, because the military is such an important part of what America is. For these, for these people to come back, whether you agree with the war or not, you still serve in the military. Whether you fought against Hitler or whether you fought in Iraq, you're still a member or a veteran of the U.S. military. And that goes beyond whatever theater of war you were in. I mean, or whatever time you happen to live in.
Exactly.
And I just feel like to leave those people to their own devices after such an intense psychological experience is just it's just setting yourself up for a huge failure, which is what we're experiencing now, I think.
Yeah. I think the big issue with that is there are programs out there. It's just the availability of the information on how to find the programs. I feel it sometimes. I mean, my company, for instance, has a great veteran hiring initiative where they go out and hire as many veterans as they can. But it's just if you're looking for a job or you're looking for something to do as a veteran, how do you find those programs? How do you find those programs? And I think that's where the rubber's not meeting the road, is the how we're disseminating the information to the individual before they get out of the military.
Yeah, because if you leave it too late, then there's too much idle time and they start thinking too much. But also too, like the thing that I want to ask you is like, how much time do you need to decompress before you can be useful in society? Because obviously, if you come off the plane from Iraq on a Saturday, you're probably not ready to go to work on Monday, right? Like I mean, how much time is enough time for you to be like, okay, I'm going to shave and put on a suit and tie and go to an office, like, because you're still in combat mode. Like that shit doesn't just turn off. Like it's in you.
Yeah, there's normally pretty good terminal leave times where people take some time off, either between they're in a time of service and the time they actually go to work and other things. So I think everybody's going to be different. There's no one size fits all for that decompression. But you're right. I think it's very difficult to say you can just be out of the military one day and into a suit and tie and learning your new job the next day. But it's just, for me, it's the way we get the information into the veterans' hands, and then how can we set up better programs. The VA, severely underfunded, in my opinion, and a lot of what they do and a lot of what they're supposed to provide is rely upon other nonprofits to provide that service to the veteran.
Right.
I mean, I do a lot of fundraising for veteran nonprofits, and there's so many out there and they do so many different things. How do how do you fit a veteran with what one organization or another, and then provide them with a program that helps them write their resume and get them prepared for the next phase of their life. So I mean, it's just really hard to look at it from that scale of, all right, well, you're out of the military now. How long till you can actually be ready? And then what do we do in the meantime?
Yeah.
Like, what do we do in that interim period to make sure you're not just sitting around with a lack of purpose and doing nothing? How can we at least be preparing you for that next phase of your life through other, either nonprofit or VA programs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's not an easy question to answer, but I mean, like, it's such a real and present problem.
Yeah.
And it's such it's just such a disrespectful way to treat someone who's just risked their life for to be part of the game, to be part of the team, like to be a member of the U.S. Armed Forces. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I wish you kind of wish you could help everybody, and it's just when things happen. I had somebody I knew just commit suicide early last week.
Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it, but it's one of those things where you think somebody has their whole life in front of them, and everything's going great, grand, wonderful, and then you hear some news like that, and it's like, it hits home, like, man, like, what do we do? Like, how can we stop this? And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of smart people trying to do a lot of different things to try to help, but it's, I think it's a bigger problem than just one individual. It's got to be a lot of people coming together to try to figure it out. And how do we move this problem forward to a solution?
What could be a good solution is the VA should get a percentage of the budget for the Pentagon every year. So they shouldn't get like an amount, they should get a percentage.
Yeah.
And if the budget for the Pentagon grows exponentially over a decade or two, which it has, then the VA budget should also grow exponentially over that same period. That would be a great way to at least make sure that whatever you're spending out front is getting picked up back home. Yeah. That's just a random.
Yeah. The other thing with the VA is it's not just the availability of care, it's the quality of care that you're dealing with. So there's just so much to it. And we could spend the whole 4 hours, I think, talking through that issue, but yeah, I agree. We got to do better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
So when you came back from your third tour and you had to re-enter society, what was what was the hack that you thought would help you get through it? Like, obviously I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but obviously physical fitness has been huge for you in your life. Like, you're an endurance athlete, was staying fit and kind of staying in the gym, working out, doing competitions. Was that part of like your hack to get through?
It became part of it. So I will say it was not the initial part of it. The initial part was I found a job, fortunately, and I operated pretty well on a day-to-day basis at my place of employment. But when it came to personal life and leaving the job, when I didn't have some level of something in front of me, purpose, and those kind of things, I've struggled. Like, it's one of those things. It's what I think a lot of people dealing with depression and anxiety and things, it happens to them. It's when you're alone in the dark at night, the demons come. And that was what was happening with me. And I turned to unhealthy ways to cope with it. I turned to alcohol. I turned to just doing, stuff that I shouldn't have been doing to try to cope with that time where I had to, face myself. I did not go to the gym. I from 2012, 13 time frame to about 2016, I had gained probably about 50 pounds, unhealthy weight, not good.
I don't believe it.
I'll show you pictures. It was rough. But then in 2016, we had our daughter in 2014. Me and my ex had our daughter in 2014, and then 2016, we split. And it was right around that time that I had lost hope in everything. I was basically an alcoholic at that point. I was drinking every night to try to go to bed. I was self-medicating. I was doing all the wrong things. I wasn't able to communicate. I didn't want to communicate with people. I built walls. I did everything wrong, and from my perspective, for how I could cope with what I was dealing with. And then in November 2016, I was at a Days Inn one night, and I knew exactly how I was going to take my life, and I was ready to do it, and fortunately did not. And part of that was just thinking about my daughter going through life without me, and then my family, and just I was able to put off doing it that night. But the next morning, I showed up at my mom and dad's house, kind of broken. That was rock bottom. I was broken. I was crying, and I just remember telling my mom, I need help. I got to get help. So we, got a doctor's appointment, went through all the, those kind of different things. And that was November 2016. And then like I said, I had split with my ex at the time, my mother of my child. And that was early on 2017. I remember kind of starting to, it was kind of just living life, kind of just walking through life, but nothing excited me. Nothing really was, something that I wanted to do. But I remember looking at my daughter one morning and just looking at myself in the mirror and being like, what kind of example am I providing to her? And what kind of legacy am I going to leave? What kind of person am I to her? And that kind of like pulled me to like, all right, let's just look for something. Let's just go out and try to find something, get a gym membership. Let's just start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up finding on, like, I got a Groupon deal thing randomly for a Spartan race, like a mud obstacle course race. And it was for a cheap, pretty cheap, for just an open, go out and run it and, see what happens kind of thing. And it was in a mountains out in Virginia. So I signed up for that. And then I remember going and getting my gym membership, got on the treadmill for the first time and probably ran like a 13-minute mile or something like that. Barely couldn't breathe, like just sucked.
And you must have been, I'm just going to assume you were very fit when you were serving.
I was, yeah. I was the guy that had the perfect PT scores and things like that. Always met maximum stuff. So, completely between the time I got out to the time that, that decision was made I need to get off my ass and do something, I had lost who I was completely. And I had lost identity. I was in a bad place mentally and physically. And so, started that Spartan race to mid June 2017. And, out of 1,000 people, I probably finished 1,000. Like it was that bad. Like I remember.
Good first run though.
Good first run. It was, they have a bucket carry, like a heavy bucket carry. Like it's probably a quarter mile heavy bucket carry. And I dropped that thing about 15 times. I feel like there was one time where I just sat on the bucket and just felt sorry for myself. And, but I remember crossing the finish line and kind of saying to myself, like hurting in pain, but saying to myself, that's never going to happen again. Like that feeling could never happen to me again. And so I started training and signing up for more Spartan races and I really liked that because it was obstacle course, kind of what I did in the military, kind of different functional fitness type stuff. And
those races are full of testosterone.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like that's a fucking manly.
Yeah.
And both genders do it. Like men and women are both fighting it out there. I've seen it. Yeah. I've never done one.
Yeah.
We should do one together.
Man. Yeah. I'd be down. Like have them out here in LA.
Right too.
But yeah, I remember just being like, okay, this is what I'm going to do to get back in shape. And then I instead of looking at it from a bigger picture of like, I want to lose 50 pounds and do all this stuff. And this is what I tell people all the time that are trying to get back into shape or get in shape period is you can't look at it from, the bigger goal is like, I want to lose 100 pounds. The best way I think to do it is to break it down into the smaller, more achievable goals and say, I want to lose 2 pounds or this week or, 2 pounds every 2 weeks or whatever it's going to be. And then after the course of a year or 2 years or whatever it's going to be, you meet that end state goal. Because when you look at it, the goal too big, sometimes you don't lose 15 pounds the first month and you give up hope and you just resort back to regular life. So I started signing up sporadically for every like 2 months a new Spartan race, like from June 17 through December of 17. And by December of 17, I had lost 35 pounds, and I was finishing the top 20 of like elite pro level Spartan races. From going from being the thousandth of a thousandth person to doing that, it was a big achievement for me. And then 2018 happens. I start qualifying for kind of national level championships. 2019 happens, and I'm qualifying for competing for world championships. 2020 comes up, and I'm thinking I'm going to wreck the world. This is my year. And then COVID happened.
and we've all got COVID stories. Which is how I met you. And I'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say is I kind of came up with because I was obviously a university athlete like you were, and I've had a lot of difficulties with motivation, staying fit, after that university experience, because obviously it's like, well, why am I training? What am I doing? And I never found something afterwards like the Spartan race, which kind of kept me training. But instead of like setting goals for myself, I would just set a routine. And instead of having numbers in my head about speed or weight loss or anything like this, I just tried to never miss a session.
Yeah.
And it's the same in sports. Like, you're never going to be on every day, but as long as you're there and fighting through a bad day, you're way better off than just missing the day entirely. Yeah. And I became like schedule obsessed. Yeah. Instead of result success. Yeah. Or obsessed. And that really helped me, like, psychologically just kind of get back into it without thinking, like without overthinking it. Yeah. Because I feel like 90% of our problems is just us overthinking. Yeah. And if we can just take the brain out of it and just be like, oh, Tuesday, 2:00, this is where I'm supposed to be. No fucking questions asked. Yeah. It's not about a goal. It's not about running a 3-minute mile. It's not about being 175 pounds with 3% body fat. Yeah. It's just, nope, it's Tuesday, 2 p.m. That's where I'm supposed to be. Yep. And just kind of getting back into that. And then if you do that for like 18 months, you're going to see the results. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where I lacked, because like you said, I was a collegiate athlete, moved straight in the military. So every day in the military, you're up at 6 a.m. for physical fitness, PT. So you're up every morning at 6 a.m. to do that. So the routines were built in my entire life. And it was, it was football, military, get out of the military. There's nobody telling me what I got to do anymore.
Yeah. And it's like, what the hell do you do?
Yeah. So then I completely lost routine, and then you find yourself on the couch. You spend a full day at work. You're not, told to go to the gym in the morning or anything like that. You go to work, you get home, you cook dinner, and you're like, I don't really feel like going. And you do that over and over and over.
And then a drink or two, and then a drink or two, and then you're drunk at 9 p.m. on your couch or something, and it's just like you didn't exercise at all, and you're fucked.
And that became my routine. Yeah. And then
it sounds like COVID for me. I don't mean to.
Yeah.
No. But it's been a slow couple of years.
Yeah. So that became my routine, and it wasn't until I was able to break that routine and get back into like the commitment to myself, like.
And it seems to your daughter, the commitment of being a good role model to your daughter, that seems to be huge from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was without her being able to really say it, she's the one that held me accountable. Like, it was, okay, I got to be able to be a good, positive role model for her. And I got to, she's going to emulate what she sees from me as she grows older. And then also, what kind of example am I going to provide to her of what one day, if she wants to, date or marry or something, what kind of man am I being an example for her on, like, just the commitment to my dedication to keeping my commitments and being physically fit and treating her the right way, make sure she, I open doors and take her on date. All those things just played into me having to change that routine and that dynamic and being a different person.
Well, because you'll shape your dedication to raising her is going to shape how she sees every man in her life
ever. Yeah. And so it was definitely that. And then COVID happened, and then when COVID happened, I got a little freaked out because there wasn't anything on the schedule, there wasn't anything on the calendar anymore. So I became like, am I going to fall back into this person?
Yeah. Are you going to go back to 2014, 15?
Exactly.
Which were dark days, right?
Yeah. And so that's when I realized I had to do something. I had to schedule things for myself. Like, it was like, all right, Well, I think it was March was when COVID kind of kicked in. All the gyms shut down. All I could really do was run. And so I went out for runs every day. And then
was your daughter's school closed? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it was.
Okay,
It was.
so and you were co-parenting at this stage?
Yeah.
So she was with you sometimes and with your ex sometimes? So,
Yeah.
So at least you didn't have a child at home with you doing nothing also, right? Like there was some sharing of that responsibility.
There was sharing of the responsibility, which I've been very blessed with. My daughter's mother is great. She's the best mother I could ever ask for. Things didn't work out between the two of us, but when it comes to one thing, our commitment to our daughter, we share the same mindset, and that's what matters at the end of the day. And so we bounced back and forth, teaching kindergarten because my daughter had just started kindergarten, had finished the first, first semester of kindergarten basically, and then was in the second when COVID happened. And so I've turned into a kindergarten teacher all of a sudden, and I'm, oh gosh, what do I do with the other 6 hours of the day after you go through this little course book this teacher assigned to you? So it was happening.
How many pets did you adopt?
None, fortunately. Well, that's a lie. My ex ended up getting like a chinchilla or right around that time. There was a couple of pets that showed up around that time, but we had a Chihuahua, so the house was taken care of with the Chihuahua.
I found Whiskey the cat that what greeted you when you came. I found him on the streets of Istanbul during COVID, so that was big for me.
Yeah,
that company having him with us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having an animal was like definitely something that helped me through too. Is just having that routine of being able to take the dog out for walks and doing all those kind of different things. But yeah, so I just started running a lot during COVID, and the other disappointment was COVID year. I was scheduled to climb Kilimanjaro in like September, October time frame of 2000.
This is what we talked about when we had our COVID call, and I talked to you when I was stuck in Istanbul. We talked about how you missed out on this climb.
Yeah. So missed out on that. So now I'm disappointed about that. All the gyms are closed. I'm not training for anything at this point. So
they should have kept the Spartan races going because you're outdoors, right? I mean, come on.
It was wild seeing how everything just completely went away. But I think it was Memorial. So March is when COVID kind of really happened. And then Memorial Day weekend, I set a challenge for myself so Saturday that week, I wanted to run the most miles I'd ever run before. And it was a 50. I basically went out saying I wanted to run a 50K. So 30 miles basically. And I went out Saturday morning and ran a 50K. And then Sunday morning,
in one day?
In one day. It took me 4.5 hours. And this is when...
That's amazing for anyone not from Kenya.
So, yeah. Well, so
if you're from Kenya, it's 2.5 hours.
So yeah. So this is when this is when Jason, the ultra runner, was kind of formed, because I started really falling in love with that challenge. So 30 miles took me about 4.5 hours. And then I posted it on my Instagram, and I had some friends that had done ultras before, and they reached out and said, "That shit, Jason, that's not a bad time. Like, you could be good at this."
Yeah.
And then, so the next day, Sunday, I woke up and I was like, well, I ran the most miles I ever did, yesterday. Let's see how fast I could run 1 mile. And I ended up running like a 4-minute, 58-second mile. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Like, I might be good at this running thing that I used to really hate. And so I just started building my mileage every month, and because the gyms stayed closed. And so I was getting to a point where I was almost running, like, doing basically 100-mile weeks.
Wow. That's how you got through.
Yeah.
Amazing.
If I wasn't in front of a computer doing work or, being dad, I was probably you could find me out on a road or a trail.
Wow.
And so
what were you doing for work at this stage, if you don't mind me asking?
This time I was doing project management, basically managing some military contracts with IT type stuff. So most of the time it's just sitting in front of a laptop, managing people, managing schedules, making sure people are getting code done complete and things like that on time. So
it was a job you felt comfortable doing from home, is what I was trying to get at, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you weren't like unemployed, like literally doing nothing. Like you did have some work responsibilities that you had to.
Yeah. So that was that was another big fortunate for me, is the contract I was on said, hey, you can work from home. I actually work from home still to this day for the most part, because they realized the type of work we do could be done anywhere in the world. So I would work. I'd, spend time with my daughter if I had her that day. If I didn't have her that day, you'd find me on the road. If I did have her that day, I'd be on the treadmill in my back room when she went to sleep and getting 10, 15 miles in on the treadmill. And then
I'm doing Instagram live chats with strangers abroad, which is how we met, which I love, Yeah.
It was awesome. But yeah, I mean, just things like that. And then October, I think, of that year, 2020, is the first ultra marathon, or the first events started opening back up. And it was a 13-hour race that popped up. And I was like, well, let's just give this a shot. Let's
running for 13 hours?
13 hours. And so I hadn't done it at that point. I had run tons of miles.
Yeah.
So I signed up for that race. And the reason it was a 13 hours is because it was when the daylight savings, when the clock sets back an hour. So you gain an hour worth of running. So if you run from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., you're still at 13 hours, because at 2 or whatever it does, it goes back another hour, and then so you get 13 hours out of that. And in the 13 hours, I ran about 70 miles. And
70 miles.
Yeah, it was about 67 miles is what was my final mile count. And I finished second place in the race.
Amazing.
And I was like, well, shit, maybe I'm good at this. And so immediately, my mind went from running as a way to like cope with things to like, I'm not only coping, but I'm pretty good. Let's go bigger. So the next year is when 2021 is when things really, like, at least outdoors type stuff, if I remember right, like running outdoors, started opening up. So I signed up for a 24-hour race in April of 2021, and I finished second place. I ran 101 miles in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's like 140 kilometers. Holy, yeah.
So I ran 101 in 24 hours and finished second place in that race. And
there's this asshole that kept beating you in first place. Got to take his knees out or
different
something.
Person every time.
Different person.
Yeah. But so I just started signing up for more and more of those races. And then it was 2021. I'm trying to get my year straight now. 2022 is when I really did a lot of different races. But into 2021 is when I climbed Kilimanjaro. Finally got my shot.
That's amazing. I'm glad you stayed with that, because that was a big letdown for you when we talked. I think you and I talked in like May 2020.
Yeah. So September of 2021 is when I got a chance to climb Kilimanjaro. So did that, and it was interesting because that was still when COVID was a big thing, especially internationally. So you had to. We were about to summit, and we had to do the swab test to make sure that when we came down, we had the time frame right so that we could get on our flights to go back home.
That's insane, right? Yeah, because they come off the mountain and you go from the summit to almost the bottom of the mountain in one day.
Yeah,
and then the next day you're on a plane.
Yeah, because when we summited, and then it was 2 days down, basically 2 days down the mountain, if I remember right. And
isn't that a great summit? Like, I love Kili because you wake up at like midnight-ish, have a little food, then you climb up. You got the sunrise, you got the summit, and then you come back down, eat, sleep for like an hour or two, and then it's all the way down the fucking mountain. And that's the worst downhill I've ever experienced as a adventurer, climber, trucker.
We raced down the mountain.
Fuck you.
So it was all part of.
Of course you did.
No, it was all part of an attempt. It was World's Highest Events is the organization. They put on a couple different things, but so part of the whole deal was climb Kilimanjaro. Go down into the crater and do an obstacle course, which was the world's highest obstacle course at the time.
At 5,600 meters or whatever.
Yeah,
it's just 20. Yeah. It's like 18,000 feet or something.
Yeah. So I didn't get to the obstacle course in time. I struggled a little bit with the actual summit. I got to Stella's Point, and I was like, because Stella's, for most people that don't know, that haven't climbed Kili, is almost like a small summit.
Yeah, it's a two summit system. Yeah, you got Stella's, which is like the top of the hill, but not the summit.
Yeah.
And then you've got a fairly flat track that goes up to the actual summit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was taking like baby steps to get to the actual summit, because Stella, I don't know if it was a mind fuck or what, but
false summits can really mess with your motivation and your psychology when you're climbing. Like when you think you've made it, and then you get there and there's more, that's soul destroying.
So when they were taking me down into the crater to the medical tent that they had set up down there, the friends that I climbed with, they were like, "Jason, you were gray, like coming down." Like my blood oxygen went from, whatever it was when we were about the summit, the night we were going to summit, probably in the 70s or 80s or whatever it was, down to like 55.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in that medical tent. And so they put me on a little bit of oxygen. And they said, you probably should skip the obstacle course. And so they took me down to the one camp that you just mentioned. We were asleep for like an hour or two. And then we slept for an hour or two. We walked down. I can't remember what the next camp was. But I slept that night. Felt a little sorry for myself that I didn't do everything that I wanted to do. I still had the summit under my belt, which was, number one goal. But when I woke up the next morning, it was my daughter's birthday. And I just told myself, like, they did the second stage of the run down the mountain. And I missed the first stage because of everything that was going on with me medically. But I went to the guys that set up the event. And I said, hey, I wouldn't feel good about myself if I didn't at least run. They're like, if you feel like you're good and the medical can say you're good, we're all for it. So I ended up running down the mountain and ended up finishing in a pretty good time, but it just didn't qualify for anything. But it was just my own. I have to do this for myself.
Yeah.
And so ran down the mountain, finished, and then when we did the awards thing that night, I'm seeing everybody get their world record stuff, and I'm feeling pretty shitty about myself because I'm like, oh man, I just struggled, couldn't do it. And then one of the final awards is they gave a cowbell out to 2 people for like most courageous type thing, and I got one of those. And
nice.
I think for me personally, that went more than just the world record thing. It was just like a proof that I had pushed through and done things for myself.
It doesn't matter how fit you are.
Yeah.
You have no idea how your body is going to react to altitude.
No.
And the thing that most people don't understand, and this is my wheelhouse, is that at sea level, you have, let's call it a baseline of like 100% oxygen level entering your body, right? Mm-hmm. At 5,000 meters above sea level, which is about 17,000 feet, it's half.
Yeah.
And of course, Kili is around 19 or 20,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And then of course I've done some climbing higher than that, but you have absolutely no idea how you're going to react. And even if you've done it before, the next time out, you could have anxiety, you could have stress, you could have other things going on in your life, which hinder you. I like to compare it between like having one small dent in your armor mm-hmm. that altitude sickness can like find its way into, and then it just destroys all of you. So if you have like one chink in the chain, whole thing's done.
Yeah, and I have people that talk to me that said the exact same thing. They're like, just because you're fit doesn't mean you're gonna have this like swimmingly well climb. It just depends on the day. It could depend on that morning. I remember waking up that morning. I felt good all the way up to the point where we were at like 15K or 15,000 feet. And then the summit is a push from basically 15, 16 to 19. And I remember waking up and just felt kind of a headache. And then we started doing the switchbacks kind of up.
Yeah, with your little headlamp on.
The little headlamp on.
Looking at the ground.
Yeah, the porters are singing their songs. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm starting not to feel too good. And then we got to Stella and I'm like, I'm really not feeling too good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a learning experience for me. It was just, that was my first real, anything above 14. That was the first time. And it was,
no joke.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's go back. So obviously I was in Ethiopia in March 2020 when the world closed.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to get out. I was filming in the Simien Mountains in northern Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And then I got into Istanbul. You and people like yourself saved my life basically in Istanbul, because I just remember being so bored.
Yeah.
Drinking way too much. Because my life was like 300 days a year on the road almost. Mm-hmm. So we were making like 8 to 10 episodes a year. Mm-hmm. Each episode is 2 weeks. So we were like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And then I was doing like 30 or 40 speaking engagements a year in between all that. So like I was really moving. And then I remember when COVID hit and I was just in Istanbul, I was like beyond bored.
Yeah.
I just remember like, again, it was like nothing tasted great.
Yeah.
Candy didn't do it. Alcohol didn't do it. Like I was missing the flavor of life. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started doing these COVID calls just to connect with people all around the world. And you were one of them. Mm-hmm. Now, can you remember how we set that up?
Oh man.
Because I don't even remember. I think I followed you, or you just reached out to me, and or something? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I remember somehow we started DMing each other, and the next thing you know, we're like, let's do a COVID call.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
What is a COVID call?
Yeah.
Who's this idiot in fucking Istanbul?
Yeah. But no, I remember I'd followed you for a while because I was starting to get into that, the intrigue of adventure and Kilimanjaro and all that kind of stuff had really gotten to me, and like, I started following some people that had traveled, done worldly type travel, and I remember watching some of the episodes that you had done and everything, and so I started following you, and then and I forget how it happened during COVID, but I just remember being like, I'm just gonna start DMing people.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like, so the thing for me was like I had an entire crew. I had a whole production company, right? So I had everyone hired. So I had like 6 or 8 people all working for me.
Yeah.
And I was in Istanbul. And you watch the news and they're like, okay, borders are closed for 2 weeks and then we'll reassess. 2 weeks, reassess. 2 weeks, reassess. And I kept everyone on staff because I was like, oh, well, we'll be back working in a month.
Yeah.
So nothing changes, guys. Like, enjoy your holiday and we're going to get back at it. And then it was just like fucking like 4 months later, and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And I basically was like, well, I have to make my own TV show and do something in Istanbul or I'm going to lose my mind, right? So what I did was I did like 100 COVID calls that lasted an hour on Instagram Live in 100 days.
Yeah.
Basically. And that kind of like saved me mentally.
Yeah.
Just communicating with people, setting up a time, going live, doing all the Q&A and just connecting with people, because the existence in obviously Istanbul's a city of like 30 million, but it never felt lonelier than during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was closed and things like that. And you're, away from your friends and family and stuff like that. It was really not easy. But friends like you kind of really saved the day. So I was always very appreciative of that.
No, I mean, again, you probably, I appreciate you too. I mean, just the social interaction piece, I think was missing for a lot of people. I mean, I remember just working from home. My social interaction was obviously with some like employees that I had and everything like that. But then most of my miles were lonely miles out on a trail or something like that. And then other than that, there was no other social interaction. So being able to talk to other people that, that was huge for me. And so that just having the COVID call was like, oh man, this is something to look forward to. And then it was fun having it. And then watching your COVID calls as you continued to do them. And just listening to people talk and not, watching Tiger King on Netflix was
Tiger King took us through COVID nicely.
Yeah.
How, but again, so what I've done now that I've come back to the US is I've tried to like reconnect with anyone that was a US based that I did a COVID call with. Right. And you're the second person that I've been fortunate enough to reconnect with, but how much better is it doing this than to do fucking something on Instagram or something on Zoom?
It's a million times better. Like if I can do a podcast face to face or just like anything face to face, you get an opportunity to really have a conversation. It doesn't feel forced. You're not, because I feel like when you're on Zoom, like you have this ability to look at the clock in the bottom right and you're kind of in your, comfort space, but to have a genuine conversation with somebody face to face and be able to look them in the eye and like see body language and all that kind of stuff is just completely different. And it's valuable. And I think we're post-COVID still lacking that, still lacking people going out and actually having physical conversations with people. It's very easy to just be like, oh, let's just jump on a Zoom call, things like that. And, my girlfriend and I are in a long distance relationship. I live in Virginia and she lives here in LA, and we do, we Zoom call and we talk, for hours at a time sometimes. But there's nothing like sitting there together and, having conversations face to face and, seeing the body language and understanding each other to that, at that level. So yeah, I think it's just a huge value add. And I just want people to get away from the laptop, get from behind a laptop or a computer or a cell phone and, get in front of somebody and actually have physical conversation.
Well, so I had a chat on the podcast with someone last week, and afterwards, we went out and had a whiskey and just like decompressed for a bit. And he was a really nice guy. And he's just like, that was so great.
Yeah.
And he goes, I can't remember the last time I spent like 2.5 hours not looking at my phone, because we turn off our phones so it doesn't affect the audio equipment, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't remember the last time I just looked at someone else in the eyes and talked.
Yeah.
For that long. He goes, but it actually has a physical, like it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
To interact with another human being that you've just met, at least engaging without distraction.
It does, definitely, 100%. Like and that's what, for people that get outside the house and go to different places, I think that's been therapeutic for me. Before we did the COVID call, I had already been 10 days to the Amazon jungle, and then I did 10 days in Nepal doing work for an organization called Wine to Water, where we did like water filtration systems and built water wells and things like that. And then on Kilimanjaro, obviously. But there are places where, cell phone electronics don't really exist. So getting to step away from the world for a minute and just disconnect from everything was just so therapeutic. And then just having personal conversations with people that were either volunteering with me or people that lived in the villages, and getting to like have those kind of face-to-face conversations was extremely therapeutic, because it's, you're not constantly thinking about you're missing a message, you're missing an email or things like that. You're engaged one-on-one with that person, and you're not bothered by anything else, and you're learning about people, and you're growing as a person, I feel like, versus, just living life behind a screen.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Like I had this realization when I was doing my 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off for like a decade making adventure content. I would pretty much be 2 weeks without internet access. So, and without social media. So, you let people who are close to you in life, let you know that you're going to be offline. You have a sat phone for emergencies and whatever. But basically you're out there, right? And you're only really connected with the people who are going through this thing with you. And it was so refreshing, and it was so mentally healthy, and it was so physically healthy, and to sleep and to wake with the rhythm of the earth, to go to bed at 6:30 p.m. because it was dark, and to wake up at 5 when the sun came out. Like, there were so many things in this like little bubble that I had created for myself with this television show. And then when it stopped, I wasn't able to disconnect and to kind of hide from the world while making my own content. Like I found myself bothered by everything.
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm still trying to shake till this day. Like, because nothing, like, honestly, from like 2010 till 2020, March, nothing bothered me. Like like I was like, what, a Teflon? Like, nothing would stick to me. Nothing would stick to me.
Yeah.
And I was just coasting through life. But since COVID, you have too much time to think. You're too connected. People can reach you, and you just have to deal with people that you wouldn't want to normally deal with.
Yeah.
And the anxiety and the stress around that is just painful. And I just find myself not constantly like angered, but definitely at an elevated level that I was before COVID. Because before I didn't give a shit about anything. I was just rolling.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what, like, getting pulled back into our society, like how that transition has not gone well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we talked about it already. This is a similar transition for people to leave in the military. Like you're serving with this, these other people that you view as brothers and sisters, and you get to know them very well and everything else. And then you join society, and you no longer have that in a lot of cases, and it just doesn't go well.
Yeah, I mean, very similar situation, but without the combat theater. But it's amazing, like how easy it is it to be out there in the wild when you're surrounded by those good people.
Yes.
Versus having to deal with all this shittiness of living in a city of like 20 million.
Yeah. And like you're just another ant on the anthill.
Awful. So look, you're killing it. You're an endurance athlete. You're in LA. What is the rest of 2024 looking like for you at the moment?
So the last couple of years, I've been really focused on doing some like big endurance type things that people, not just doing 100-mile races that are organized, but doing things that I view as challenges for myself that I can do to raise money for a greater good. And a lot of these times it's veteran organizations. So 2022, I did a 36-hour ultra marathon where I wore a 20-pound black vest. And
why would you do that on top of doing a 20?
It was horrible. I ended up doing 101 miles, and I raised a good amount of money for an organization called Canines for Warriors. They provide canines for veterans in need that need service dogs and things like that.
Oh, that's fantastic,
Yeah,
charity.
it was awesome. And then in November of 2022, I did a 48-hour treadmill run where I ran 150 miles on a treadmill in 48 hours.
On a treadmill?
Yeah, that was rough too. I had to teach myself how to run after that again.
Oh.
And then this year in May, on the Memorial Day, May 27th, we're gonna flip a 220-pound tire, 100-kilogram tire for 24 hours. And
Just flip it down.
flip it. It's gonna be on a track. I actually applied to Guinness Book of World Records. They sent back all the things you got to do, and we're gonna probably do it on a track, do it at a 100-meter like little thing on the track, and just go back and forth for 24 hours. And I'm looking to flip it at least 11.5 kilometers in 24 hours to break a world record. And we're going to raise money for an organization called the Independence Fund.
Okay.
So it's a veteran organization. They do a lot of different services for veterans. And so we're going to raise it for them and look to, at this point, we're trying to raise about $25,000 for them. So we're going to start releasing a lot of material and a lot of fun content and things like that, websites and everything here shortly to start gearing up for that. But that's going to be one of the big things. That's the big thing for 2024, besides doing some other little races here and there and just growing personally.
Yeah. And how do you feel about your mental health and your, ability to grow and develop since, hitting rock bottom in 2016? Like,
yeah,
it's 2024. Like, are you feeling like you're, captain of your ship again and in full control of the emotions and the connection you had with the dark days, or do you still struggle? Like, where are you with that challenge?
I don't think it ever fully goes away. I think there's still challenges to be had on a day-to-day basis. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, depression. I've got my demons, and it's if I'm not aware of what I'm doing and the habits the bad habits I could find myself back into and things like that, I could spiral very easily. I mean, and everybody around me who cares about me knows, like, okay, there's times where, this is a trigger, and there's things that I've spiraled before with my girlfriend, and she's pulled me out of it. So yeah, I mean, it's not something that goes away. It's just understanding the triggers, and then knowing that it's safe to talk about it with other people and like just be open, and you don't have to build walls. You can let other people in, and you can ask for help. And it should be frowned upon to ask for help. I think a lot of people in society view, mental health and the things that we go through as a weakness, and that doesn't need to be the case. I think everybody deals with things in life, and we got to be free to talk about those things and find the assistance we need, and just know that I don't think you can ever just one day say I'm completely healed, but you just understand it better, and you understand how to deal with it better, and you understand that others are there to help you.
Yeah. No. Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming by and being so candid.
No, I appreciate you, Ryan, and I appreciate everything you do. And again, like, it's been a long time coming to get face to face with you, but yeah, I'm glad we got a chance to do this. And like I said before, COVID calls, that was a fun time, and being able to follow you and your journey through everything was just really fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to do and what you bring to the world in 2024.
Well, I'm going to be following you on these races because I will not be racing with you. That's great.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, hold on. Watch this. Now we can go to here. And thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you.